Look at this full house. Murder. So, yeah.
All right.
Don't sit any further or you'll get the back of your head on the
Oh,
screen.
well, I don't want that.
Yeah, like
I know
that's,
what the back of my head is.
that's the line right there.
Okay, welcome to the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting. This is 1 p.m. Monday, November 27th, work session day. And the first item on the agenda is citizen input. They can join us here at the table. So Kevin, what's the last name?
Gudanya.
Gudanya. I wasn't sure if it's a C or a G.
Oh, yeah, that's G. That's my G.
There you go. You own it.
Okay, just 2 minutes and I can speak.
Yeah.
Okay, my name's Kevin. I've lived here for 35 years. My wife grew up here. We're W-2'd in the city of Bend. My wife works for the county and I've had a long time career here. I'm a good taxpayer for Central Oregon. Over the weekend, we had another incident. I live out by China Hat and we had a family riding ATVs. You probably read about this, where they had a shotgun pointed at them and then one actually fired by their daughter's head. We deal with this every day. I know that you guys might not, or you might just read about it, but we deal with it every day at our place. And it's coming to, we're gonna move over it. And a lot of our neighbors are gonna move over it because we're just at that point where we don't want to fight this anymore. I don't want to come down and talk about this anymore. I see that the town, or at least Bend, has an idea to try to solve homelessness and drug addiction and try to welcome everybody here, but they're mostly doing it in our backyard. And that's not okay with us. So I'm here to just tell you again that when you're put in position of leadership and your outcomes are failures, it's time to do something different. Not have the same people lead down the same paths to get the same failures and results. That's all I have to say. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in, Kevin.
You bet.
Is there anyone else? Is there anyone online? So yeah, raised hand feature for Doreen Ty, please join us.
Good morning, commissioners. Afternoon. How are you?
Very good. Good afternoon.
Good. I sent in an email this week providing a new study about aviation pollution. A couple quotes from it. According to a new study in the journal Lancet Planetary Health, an estimated 5.455 million adults worldwide died in 2019 from cardiovascular disease attributable to lead exposure. The global cost of lead exposure in 2019 came to $6 trillion US. Sadly, government-sanctioned aviation policy is responsible for 70% of all airborne lead pollution in the US. The biggest contributors are airports used by piston engine aircraft. Though portrayed as economic engines, these facilities are actually contributing to higher death rates and increased economic costs as a direct result of pilots who ruthlessly spew homes, neighborhoods, schools, recreational areas, prime farmland, and waterways of local residents with multiple doses of lead on a daily basis. You know, Central Oregon increases leaded operations by thousands of percentage points at every airport in the region. One can no longer say it's good for our community with a straight face. You must know water, crop, livestock, runoff, and wildlife uptake, get poisoned, and redistribute lead. You must get the lead out of our airports immediately. People don't just die and get stupid from lead and excessive decibels. They suffer great physical and emotional pain. Ask me, I'll tell you about it. You must get the lead out of our airports immediately. And meanwhile, it looks like you guys are blowing your budget on a losing airport and, you know, getting rid of, it looks like you're reducing your budget on police, but increasing it on firemen. Like, are you just preparing for Armageddon? What is this elected body doing to protect our citizens? Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much for the testimony today.
Thank you, Doreen.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we do have a consent agenda today, just a couple of items that show. It's last week's business, basically. With approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? Want to welcome Christine Tony to the audit committee. It's part of this consent agenda. Seeing nothing else, Commissioner Chang? Yes. Commissioner Adair
Yes.
and Chair will vote yes.
Did Chris Duddy want to say anything about the Terrebonne wastewater system though?
You voted yes.
Yes.
Done.
Well, update if you wanna,
I've been working on this since 19, how many?
so now that we voted yes, she wants a little update, that's what that is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so what you voted allows the design to proceed towards basically shovel-ready status. And so the goal is to, provide a shovel-ready project that then attracts more grant funding that wants to basically immediately work towards construction, so. A little bit more investment from the county in that project will hopefully yield some positive results. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Item number 3, informational presentation of behavioral health divisions, homeless outreach services team. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Commissioners. Kara Cronin, Deschutes County Health Services Program Manager for Intensive Adult Services.
Hello, Colleen Thomas. I am the supervisor for Deschutes County Homeless Outreach Services Team and the Harm Reduction Program.
Colleen's going to get us on our presentation on the Zoom. County Administrator Lilac invited us here today to present on this. So as you know, Deschutes County Health Services and Deschutes County Behavioral Health is the CMHP of our region. A CMHP is tasked with providing safety net services to people with behavioral health issues, and that encompasses quite a lot. So the way that our host team fits in with that is providing healthcare and supports to individuals with acute psychiatric conditions who are experiencing houselessness. And our goal is to engage people in behavioral health and SUD, that's substance abuse disorder treatment. That is our bottom line goal of our outreach efforts. You can go to the next, that's our team, part of our team. So here is the homeless outreach staffing, and you can see where the funding comes from. So essentially we have a case manager and a peer support specialist for Lapine and Sisters has one team. Bend has a team and Redmond has a team. In addition to that, we have a full-time position at the Navigation Center. And we have a SAMHSA funded path position as well. So you can see we have 3 ARPA funded, 1 SAMHSA grant funded, 3 Measure 110 burn funded, and 1 City of Bend funded position.
Now, that one person that's at the Navigation Center right now, because they are now in construction and they're down to 50, is that person going to just stay there, or are they going to follow where some of the people have moved to? I don't know.
Yeah,
Colleen.
so he is 40 hours a week. I don't know if you knew, so the Navigation Center is under construction, but they were able to, at City of Bend, access the Blue Dog RV space and now are open full-time, 7 days a week. There at the they're transitioned their Lighthouse Navigation Center operation to Blue Dog RV. So he's still there supporting those folks. And then of course, working with our other team members for those folks that may not be able to access the overnight shelter that are now in the community.
So day services of transit.
Were they, because a couple of people from the Navigation Center, I had a meeting with Safe Parking on Wednesday at noon, and a couple of people came there and they were really concerned with, the 100 and some that were at the Navigation Center. So do we know where all those people are now? Are they all going to Blue Dog?
For day services, a lot of them are still accessing that site. They opened last week we're still getting kind of an understanding of who's accessing that. A lot of folks did transition or move to Redmond as the Shepherd's House shelter opened there. And then of course, folks are now just in the community. And so our case management team that's in Bend is working with those folks as well.
So it was so cold this morning. It was so bad.
Right.
So we wanted to just talk about a little bit about the homeless response system and where our team fits into that. So when we talk about the homeless response system, just in general, it really refers to various different organizations within an area that serve individuals that are experiencing homelessness, and that can include many different subpopulations within the overall population of folks that are experiencing homelessness. So that can include nonprofit organizations, housing authorities, the federal government, local governments, all supporting individuals that may be experiencing homelessness or may face experiencing homelessness. So when we talk about the homeless response system, there's really three different categories: preventing, assisting individuals, and then solving their homelessness. So when we talk about prevention, it's really working with other entities like Neighbor Impact, our local community action agency, really helping folks divert from the shelter system and from entering homelessness. And that can include rental assistance or prevention dollars to help people maintain their housing if they have it. Really, that assisting of individuals that are experiencing homelessness, that's really where the bread and butter, our team comes in, providing street outreach and connecting with folks when they are accessing emergency shelter, if that's an option. And then solving, once we're connecting with individuals, how do we get folks to exit their homelessness? And part of that is rapid rehousing, taking someone from their experiencing of homelessness into housing if it's available. Transitional housing and then permanent supportive housing are some other programs that really help solve someone's homelessness. So I kind of, as I talked about, when we talk about the response system, there are many different agencies and entities that provide and support folks that are experiencing homelessness. This is, of course, it highlights some of the main providers in our community, but it is not inclusive of everyone. So I apologize if I've left any agency out. But as you can see, where Deschutes County Behavioral Health really lands is we are a specialty care, as Kara mentioned, that we are really focusing on providing support to folks that have acute psychiatric disorders or substance use disorders that are experiencing homelessness. And we have many partners that help us along the way to support folks.
Is that slide, did you put that together for this, or were you able to pull it from somewhere? I mean, just all those partners there, because I know that's the big effort is, you know, what's the big picture? How do we coordinate better? And so that's your slide?
Yep.
Have you seen anything like that before? I've kind of coordinated homeless office and some of the big picture things we do.
I would love a copy of that, yes.
Well, yeah, as I say, I just think of that as that's one of those foundational pieces that hopefully, once people start using the same set of information.
It's just like Don's house had a rumor out there that it had closed, and yet there was still one house left for that group, that social work.
Yeah, and I always like to highlight that in, I think, Deschutes County and Central Oregon as a whole, that these providers, we work really well together in understanding what the criteria is for programs. And it's more, historically has been an informal process. And I think that's where we run into issues where there isn't a formalized process that is, as we've grown as a continuum, that understanding what is available in real time would be helpful.
So where's Don's house up there? I just kind of randomly mentioned it.
I don't know if I have Don's house on there, but they would probably fall under long-term shelter.
Okay, you've got grandmothers, but yeah, Don's isn't there. And yeah, there is still one house because we did some work investigating. Thank you to Angie. In the next room.
Would you say that most of the organizations listed on this table are connected and coordinate through the Homeless Leadership Coalition, or?
Yep, that is definitely one avenue. And a lot of these agencies now through the Homeless Leadership Coalition and the Coordinated Entry System process. So they are meeting weekly to talk about what is available and moving individuals with high acuity into available resources. So, and that is facilitated by the Homeless Leadership Coalition.
I mean, because, you know, kind of my impression of this ecosystem of organizations is that there's a lot of great organizations doing a great job. They are coordinated. I just think that there are capacity constraints,
yes,
which keep them from doing more.
Correct. Kind of leads me into really the Homeless Outreach Services team and what we do. And so we really kind of follow the progressive engagement model. And what that means is that we are meeting with folks and assessing their needs after the first interaction. It's this person-centered approach, and it's really with a focus on ending someone's homelessness. As you can see, these are the numbers from the point in time count this year, that there are 1,467 unique individuals that were experiencing homelessness in Deschutes County. Again, we know that's an undercount and we could have better data. But of those individuals, 1,076 of them were unsheltered. We don't know every person that is experiencing homelessness in Deschutes County. We, on average, per each staff member that works on the Homeless Outreach Services team, carry the caseload of about 40 individuals. And so that could be someone that we're meeting with many times a week, once a month, depending on what their needs are and as they arise and change. So really progressive engagement starts small by helping someone with their immediate needs, and then over time could increase to identify how do we move someone out of their homelessness and address their highest acuity needs. So it's, again, we really are working on a flexible approach. Things can change. Someone could have medical issues or decompensate in the community. So we will change our approach that way. And we're very targeted in who we're supporting and efficient in the work that we do. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a day in the life of one of my a staff member on the Homeless Outreach Services team. So an average day, they're probably seeing about 20 to 30 individuals, but maybe having about 8 to 10 therapeutic outreach engagements with those out of the 20 to 30. And that can include contacting Social Security, filling out housing applications, transporting someone to a medical appointment, accessing basic needs like food, water, propane, as now we are in the very cold months. It also includes contacts with community-based organizations, law enforcement, hospitals, family members, other service providers within the continuum that we just talked about. It also includes documentation. Every interaction that our staff have, for the most part, is something that we document and make sure that we're capturing the time that we're spending with folks on a therapeutic level, and travel. Some of my staff, the staff member, our case manager that works in Sisters in La Pine, usually starts his day in Bend, and then is traveling to and from La Pine and Sisters and having these 8 to 10 therapeutic engagements. And while he's driving, he might be taking phone calls on the Bluetooth to connect with some of the clients that he'll be seeing that day.
Are there treatment plans that are drawn up?
Depending on the individual, if folks are engaged in Deschutes County Behavioral Health Services and a treatment team, yes, like a more formal treatment plan. When we meet with someone in the community, we're kind of assessing what are their needs and writing that down and what are the goals that that person has. It might be to exit homelessness. It might be to get a cell phone, and we're kind of tracking those things and documenting it that way. So our team, I had my team write up a day in the life, and I'm not going to read the whole story that one of my case managers talked about, but in one day he had 10 different contacts with folks that do meet that acute psychiatric diagnosis, and he's helping them talk about the relapse prevention plan. He's connecting with Social Security, assisting folks set up cell phones. He is talking about, he was actually working with an individual on how do we set up therapeutic groups in the community for someone that is struggling with co-occurring disorders. He is helping somebody set up a phone and transferring all his contacts so that he can reconnect with family. He's filling water jugs, getting shower tokens to pass out to folks. And really just talking and helping folks work through some of their hopelessness and despair with what their circumstances are, and celebrating some successes with individuals in the community as well.
One of the clients David shared in his story is I believe a woman in Sisters area with schizophrenia who really wasn't able to navigate calling Social Security, has paranoia, those sorts of things. There are real barriers for people to navigate complex systems. And
It could be hard for anybody to call.
yeah,
Navigating systems can be really difficult, and
But
then
there are really some great people at Social Security here in Bend. I've dealt with them before and they are actually outstanding. So if, somebody needs, they're just not getting anywhere, go to the Bend office and they are incredibly helpful.
Our staff, David, used to work for Social Security, so it's been a huge plus for us to help navigate through.
He knows how to work
those complex systems. So again, I think the important piece that I wanted to share is that our staff are at capacity, working with many individuals in the community, really addressing some acute needs and complex issues.
Including crisis mitigation, like David shares. He has people in pretty extreme despair that may want to die. And he is supporting them in finding hope, and getting basic needs met. That he is also a bit of a crisis case manager out there.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the folks that we do serve and work with, there are reasons that maybe they are living unsheltered and have barriers for accessing mainstream services, even as welcoming as they can be. That someone that is living in Sisters or La Pine, Redmond, even Bend, may not want to come into the stabilization center. And so we're in the moment really doing this crisis mitigation and supporting folks walking through what they're experiencing and connecting them to the appropriate services. And that might be, bringing other providers out to these locations to really support folks in their crises.
It's just really hard work. It is, you're kind of out there. It's fairly inefficient to be driving from person to person in such a large area. But if we're not doing it, it's not happening. I think that the people on this team are really committed to supporting people, and that's what we do. We support individuals. There's other entities that hold the responsibility of the big picture of solving homelessness. We're direct service providers. We support people one-on-one or in small groups.
So does David work with anybody else when he's out there?
Yes,
As a partner?
Some days, a lot of time, because he serves both Sisters and La Pine, and we
Right.
have a peer support specialist that also supports Sisters and La Pine. But there are often days that he is out on his own because of spreading the team out. That he needs to meet folks in Sisters, while Leah, our peer support specialist, might be needing to support people in La Pine. But if there are areas that they would like to have support, and we pull from people from other areas to support folks, we can do that.
So barriers and challenges. This is kind of like pulling back a little bit to the homelessness crisis. Our number one challenge is affordable housing. So I think it's important to ground this in the idea that homelessness is a housing problem. Cities with lower housing costs like Detroit and Philadelphia, they have very high rates of poverty. And they have some of the lowest rates of homelessness because they have some of the lower housing costs. So cities with high housing costs like Seattle and San Francisco have some of the highest homelessness rates. So I really want to ground in that. Can you go back one? And additionally, states like West Virginia with low housing costs have some of the smallest homeless populations in the country, despite having some of the highest SUD, substance use disorders, and disability. So homelessness is a housing issue. So rent affordability in our region, in Bend, there's been between a 21 and 31% increase in rental costs from 2019 to 2023. And most impactful to the people we're discussing are that rents for smaller units, studios, and one bedrooms have increased the most. So a 31% increase for studio apartments. And here's the math. So the FMR means fair market rent, a one bedroom. This is probably a low estimate. When I speak with my new employees coming on, they are not able to find one bedroom apartments for $1,800 a month. But that is the official fair market rent for the region. Bend is probably higher. Redmond and La Pine might be lower. So property managers, the rule of thumb is that your housing costs shouldn't exceed 30% of your income. So $1,800 a month apartment, an income would need to be close to $4,000 a month. Minimum wage at $14.20 an hour, 40 hours a week is just under $2,000 a month. And then social security income, so these are people on disability due to, could be a lot of different reasons, medical or mental health, they receive $914 a month to live on.
But I think right now in America, people are paying up to 45% of their income. It is the worst housing takeover of people's income that's ever occurred.
Yeah.
So it's not just here, it's
It's
really
everywhere.
across the nation. So when you allocate, it's supposed to be 30%, but when you get up to 45%, that's really frightening for so many people.
Right.
But as you were also saying, you know, in places like Detroit and Philadelphia and West Virginia, housing costs are much more manageable. So
Correct.
it's a nationwide problem, but it's especially bad here.
Yeah, and we know this just from the people we're trying to hire and attract to our open positions, is that they can't afford to move here. I frankly couldn't afford to move here at this point. So also rental inventory. So not only are the costs high, there isn't anything to rent. So the vacancy rate pre-pandemic was extremely low at 2%, and it has only gotten worse since the pandemic. There is extreme competition for rentals. This is a landlord's market that if you have a grouping of applicants, you are not going to select the person who may have criminal history, may have maybe not as much income, that just aren't going to get selected. And then we really have this shelter to housing gap. So I don't know if you want to share the story of your client here.
Yeah, sure. So we, one of the success stories that we have of an individual we work with, really over the last couple of years who we met, living unsheltered here in Bend, worked with him, engaged with him. We were lucky enough to we had the Second Street shelter, so low barrier shelter. He accessed that low barrier shelter. Continuing to work with our team, we got him engaged in Deschutes County Behavioral Health so that he could address some of his underlying mental health conditions. From there, we were able to transition this individual. We have some set aside beds at the Bethlehem Inn with our burn funding, giving individuals a little bit extra time at shelter. So he successfully transitioned into Bethlehem Inn. From there, we got him connected to Central Oregon Villages, where he moved into a tiny home. Where he just had a little bit more flexibility. He was closer to where he was living. He started volunteering at the family kitchen, really giving back. And from there,
But isn't he the only man at the Central Oregon Villages?
This was before the one at Desert Streams was opening.
Okay.
This was the ones at downtown Bend at the Bend
Okay.
Church. From there, we helped him apply through Deschutes County Behavioral Health. We have a transitional housing program, Horizon House, that specifically is a 2-year max housing property for folks that have SPMI diagnoses. And he moved in there and has been living in his own apartment for the last couple of months and reconnecting with family, addressing his mental health, and reconnecting with some other folks. And he really is kind of our, for lack of a better way, poster child, where we share that story. And a lot of the people that he lived with in an encampment are seeing him and his successes and are wanting to make that change for him. The stars really aligned in his case because the units were open when they were. And we have a lot of folks that are kind of still waiting to access those other resources, but he's been very successful.
So we have clients going into shelter who want to make a change, are ready, and they might go into, let's say, the Bethlehem Inn. There is no place for them to go after that. That they're either, and there's time limits on these programs, right? So they're either returning back to homelessness, which people get a little disheartened when they know that they're gonna have to return to homelessness. So sort of why bother?
Can
Uh,
I ask a question?
yeah.
Where will this individual go when his time is up?
Great question, Janice. So we are working with this individual to apply for other low income housing. So he's on many wait lists. Come January, we'll assist him in applying for the HUD application, housing voucher program, so that can supplement some of his income to look maybe to be eligible for affordable housing as well.
What's the average length of time that's on the HUD housing, that's including find housing?
Some may never find housing. The success rate of how the housing choice vouchers is about 30%.
And if he doesn't find housing, what will happen if he's no longer in?
He may exit back into homelessness, unsheltered homelessness.
I think that, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but the number of HUD housing vouchers that Housing Works administers, but are, basically are not connected with a place that will accept HUD housing vouchers, is massive.
And these folks are in the same competition pool as people who are our employees looking for housing, that they have this voucher that can help supplement their income to pay the cost, but there might not be units. And just the last one, just sort of a lack of cohesive vision and action plan. Polarization on this issue distracts from the focus on working towards root causes. That this is, fairly politicized, and it, in our opinion, really distracts from the work of solving some of these issues. Not in my backyard. I think you guys are well versed in that. And sort of this need to address all levels on the continuum simultaneously. It's not one or the other. It's sort of all. So, there's been a lot of investment in the community with shelter beds. That's awesome. We definitely need them. There's some other programs coming online, permanent supportive housing, but it's sort of like all of it works as a system, like a ecosystem. That's what we have for you today. Any questions for us?
Well, I did have a meeting over at the safe parking in the city of Bend, and actually the people that were at the meeting were the four churches. Four churches is all that's in Bend. Now I have a list of like 64 churches to reach out to, and I'm reaching out to another involved person tomorrow about this, but honestly, four churches, one of them only has 2 spots. One of them has 5, and they've done it for 4 years. It's been incredibly successful. And I would love the message to get out is when you actually have safe parking in your parking lot, it actually makes your entire property safer. They have found that a lot less, fewer kids come in and have parties in the middle of the night, all kinds of things, because these people actually look out for the church property. It's quite amazing. So yeah, the one that's been doing it for 4 years, with 5 spots, and he felt like it was really, it's been incredibly successful, but it's really incredibly teeny when you think about what we're doing in Redmond. And, so I'm hoping we can do more here in Bend because it's important that, and it's incredibly successful.
Appreciate your continued advocacy for that.
Well, I'm working on it. They're like, they said you need to talk to the neighborhoods. The pastors may be more amenable to it, but it could be a neighborhood issue. But actually, they felt like all 4 of them said the same thing. They're in a much better position now.
And we can do something to make more regions eligible for safe parking programs at item number 5.
So there are just a couple of things, if I may, that I want to highlight for that. First of all, I want to thank Colleen and her team for the work. I have been out with you, having met the folks you're working with, having met your team. I know how hard the work is and how demoralizing it can be. So thanks for the work. I think a key takeaway from my perspective of this presentation is that this team is a small team focused on a very specific part of the homeless population. And that is the population of people that are unhoused, have serious and persistent mental illness, may or may not have substance use disorders, frankly, co-occurring with that, or physical health conditions co-occurring. But the criteria for their team are people with symptoms of psychosis or serious mental illness that is significant enough to be debilitating and makes it difficult for them to do lots of things like talk to the social security office or work, etc. So they are a small part of that huge grid you saw of service providers. They are not the end all and the be all of addressing houselessness, although they do a lot. And frankly, touch the lives of a lot of people that no one else sees because they're out there in the woods with people. The second thing I would say is I'll be involved this week in having some conversations with members of our CRO board about the effort that's being made by our CRO board to really start looking critically at citing places for people to come out of unsheltered homelessness and into other options available. And just hope that you all are giving that effort your goodwill and your good thoughts. One way you can do that with us on behalf of people who are unhoused is to speak well of that community. So what I have observed over and over again are horror stories being told in public because they are eye-catching and attention-grabbing and scary for all of us who live in the community. We are going to struggle to ask our neighbors to welcome the people we serve into their community if we only talk about how dangerous these folks are. The vast majority of the people we serve are not, in fact, dangerous. In fact, they are 10 times more likely to be victims of crime. So I'm just inviting our community, our leaders, to reflect what's true about the vast majority of people we're serving, which is that they are in quite dire straits. They are welcoming of assistance. They may not use it the way we would always want them to, but that may be because of conditions they're experiencing that most of us have no idea how we would navigate. So please partner with us in shedding good light on some of these folks who will jump at the chance to have an opportunity to be safely housed and learn, just like we are. Thanks.
Can I ask, so the poster child story that you shared with us is the idea of the person coming to the end of their time at
Horizon House.
At Horizon House, not being able to put their HUD housing voucher if they get one to use and not finding housing, cycling back into homelessness. You know, that is a tragedy for that person. That's a tragedy for our community. And just from a very, like mundane, practical, administrative perspective from the county, it really sucks because that person is back on your workload. And I, kind of following that thought, I'm wondering, how many people you work with who have persistent mental illness or who have a substance use disorder, who are ready, maybe not all the way at the end, they're ready for permanent housing, but are ready to go to treatment or, be in a residential treatment facility, and how much it adds to, and kind of creates persistent workload for your team because you can't move that person the next 3 squares to the next level of service provision or next service providers, really. Can you comment on that a little bit? I mean, how, like, if there were more places for people to go who are struggling with mental illness or with substance use disorders, but who are ready, willing to go to the next step. What would that do to your caseload and your workload?
Yeah, I think if we had places for folks to go, we would help transition them to that. Right now, we have a lot of folks that are ready and we're just continuing to help them maintain safely in the community until there is space for them to go. So if there was options, more immediate options for folks to transition to, I think that that would free up the team to be connecting with more folks that need, because there are, as I shared the numbers, there are many people that are experiencing homelessness that we don't touch or we are not aware of. And so if we weren't continuing to, we have to focus on the folks with the highest acuity. And so that does take a lot of time, effort in the community to support them. And if we had options to transition them to the other levels of service or care, that would free us up to be connecting with more people.
So this, for lack of a better word, this maintenance work, essentially, while people are in a holding. You're trying to keep them in a holding pattern, not drop out. This maintenance, this holding pattern where it consumes a tremendous amount of your staff resources. So logical next step of that, logical next thought from there is if we can expand the permanent supportive housing and other kinds of places for people to go within our community, then conceivably we would be able to turn the corner on this instead of just spending a bunch of time, a bunch of our staff time on maintenance and keeping people in a holding pattern until there's something available.
Yeah, I think programs like Central Oregon Villages, Oasis Village are coming online, the Cleveland Commons or whatever the name that it will be, is a great opportunity for us to really be providing that intensive case management and engagement with individuals. Because if we don't have options for folks, the despair increases and the distrust that we're not able to address what they're identifying as their needs and wants. And so some of those programs have been really successful for us to really be able to offer services to folks.
I mean, I want to tie it back to one of the earlier slides, which showed that 3 of the positions that you currently have are ARPA funded, and that ARPA funding is finite. And if we're essentially in sort of like a surge mode right now and for the host team, it would be great if we could have a surge on some of those longer term places for people to go to serve folks, the target population for the host team, so that when those ARPA funds end, we can do the job with 3 less people if there's no other funding sources to replace those.
Commissioner, those positions we did convert to regular positions, knowing that we may still be in pretty dire straits in a couple of years. We hope not, but that's a possibility. That said, without the ARPA dollars supporting them, we still have mandated core services we're required as the CMHP and as the county, frankly, to provide that cost money as well. And so we will come to a point of making difficult choices about what we can staff and what we can't, because we're not actually a homeless service providing agency, we're a community mental health program. And we have to do all the things and address this community crisis in addition to the fentanyl crisis. So that's a lot. And some of the dollars that support that work are not long-term or permanent dollars. So that's just a tension that we live with as we look into the future.
Yeah, and I wasn't kind of bringing that up, to kind of focus us on tightening the ship in a couple of years.
Right.
I bring that up to just explain why this is a critical moment for us to make those other places, make the permanent supportive housing and other places where people can go to take the pathway out of homelessness, make those a high priority.
And we'll walk alongside them for that process.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thank
the
you.
update.
Thank you.
Item number 4, work session discussion of Deschutes County 2020 to 2040 DFB. Russell, welcome. Special consultant.
Returning comment, I guess. And I'm just gonna share my screen really quick here. We just have a brief presentation for the board this afternoon.
So we're gonna get their presentation. Okay, thank you.
So you were asking for the slides from the last item.
Yes, yeah, I'm like, wondering why we didn't get it before.
Very good. Good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, my name is Tarek Rawlings. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner with the Community Development Department and the County Road Department. And to my right here is Peter Russell, also a Senior Transportation Planner. And I was gonna sort of give some preliminary info on a work session item, but also let you know that I think this is one of maybe, there's maybe only one other instance of Peter Russell being in person at, I think that will be the Tumalo Community Plan work session or public hearing, but today is his last in-person sighting during the transportation system plan update.
Is he moving to
I hear it was a
Arizona?
special moment.
I said, are you moving to Arizona or something?
Not for a while. He doesn't want to disclose on the mic.
Seriously, not a disclosed location.
Just going on a lot.
If you'd like to fund the move, however.
Yeah.
Well, so thanks everyone for showing up.
Protection program.
And and thank you, Peter, for all the help with the transportation system plan. We also have, if you have questions later on, we have Chris Doty here, Department Director, and Cody Smith, Assistant Director. But I think without further ado, we'll just kind of provide you with some background information. Today's item is a work session in preparation for a public hearing on November 29th. This is for the county's transportation system plan update for the years 2020 to 2040. And the file numbers are 247-23-000507-PA and 508-TA. And I'll hand it over to Peter Russell now for kind of an overview on the TSP background, public process, and sort of the purpose of a lot of these of this plan.
Couple questions.
Oh,
So
sure.
how legislative is this, or, is this kind of like a land use decision being published by the county, or,
It's
what kind of-
legislative.
Yeah,
That's completely legislative.
okay, but it is, it's those, the file numbers you just said, so it's very much kind of the standard process, legislative.
Yes.
Right.
It's a work product after all the input and analysis.
Yeah,
Exactly, yeah.
And you'll have an ordinance adopting.
Right.
And it'll be folded up into the comp plan.
Yes.
This will be, I think it's considered an appendix of the comp plan, but either way, they're incorporated by reference and speak to each other that way. So.
Well,
Without
thank you for
further
having me
ado-
back for one last time. Gonna walk you through, for those of you who've never enjoyed a transportation system plan adoption process before, I'll kind of set the stage of what is a transportation system plan, lovingly known as a TSP. So it's, we're going to ask, it's the transportation of Deschutes County comp plan. So when Nicole Mardell was out doing the comp plan along with staff, I went to a couple of her meetings. And then if she got transportation questions at a meeting I wasn't at, she would relay it to me. So we've had lots of feedback back and forth on the comp plan and TSP. The TSP provides a prioritization of projects the county can build in the next 20 years. Now, it's important to remember what the county TSP applies to. It's only county maintained facilities and state highways. So that's principal arterials or state highways, and the arterials and collectors are for the county. We're not doing anything with local roads unless something in a functional reclassification, the TSP, that a local road, a local county maintained road, not a local access road, but a local county maintained road, went up to a collector, or a collector came down to a local road, but it's only in the county system that we're concerned about. It reflects the county's priority, preserve and maintain our existing roadways based on operational analysis that Kilson Associates did. They were the consultant on this, so they ran traffic projections, and looked at our specs and standards of what our mobility standards are and where we were meeting, what we weren't meeting, what might be needed to be done, and also built upon the Transportation Safety Action Plan that the road department did a few years ago.
Peter, I do have a question. I was looking at this and there are comments on 4 different roadways that say possible database error updating to Madge County mapping that was left in this, and I was just wondering.
So those deal with the functional classification of different
Right.
roadways.
Yes.
And some of the discrepancies in mapping are, so for instance, there's one that's the old George Milliken Highway that goes kind of north of Highway 20 up into Crook County. That one historically got, just as an example, the classification just got misaligned with the state's classification. So that's where some of those specific requests are included in the functional classification project list there that you're looking at.
Okay, so is that message gonna be changed at some point? Or
It depends on sort of how the classification ends up being treated, but it's whether that's the result of that mapping error or some other historic information. Those are largely pointing to the historic treatment of that classification.
So that brings up the concept, when do we, if there's discussion like that and we're proposing a word change, when does that happen? Because, you know, this is a work session in preparation for.
Sure, so that would be during your hearing process, much like the planning commission had recommendations, which, you know, Tarek will get to in a bit.
Yeah, so this is just.
That's where the board, here's a staff presentation, here's from the public, and then you, like any other public hearing process, you then take in what you heard from staff and the public, then you make a decision whether to change, take as is, deny. So yeah, you'll have all the options that you normally have for any other legislative decision. Adding.
That's, yeah, we're starting that process Wednesday.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is a long-term vision for our transportation system for various modes, and one of the modes also includes freight movement and safety. So you're driving, you're riding, you're biking, you're walking, you're taking transit, it's airports. So it's all modes that are identified in the transportation plan rule that we're meeting. So it's a state requirement. Okay, so why update the TSP? For the reason I think we all understand is that the population has grown dramatically in Central Oregon, particularly Deschutes County, its cities, its rural areas. And akin to that, we also have a lot of traffic that has increased in the county, both on the state system and the county system. We did have a dip during the pandemic era, but that's becoming more and more in the rearview mirror. So you have to look at your older plan, which was 2012, start that in 2012, and so it was going to go from 2010 to 2030 was its horizon year, and say, are those assumptions and growth rates that we had last time, are they different now, and do we need to make changes to TSP? We also look at funding levels. We have certain ways that we fund, those are covered in chapter 6. So you look at your project list, you have some rough cost estimates, you have some funding estimates, what are you going to build, what are you not going to be able to build, you provide a prioritization of those. Again, there's nothing that stops the board during the capital improvement process from taking what was a low project in TSP, if that's the way you go, and elevating it or downgrading one. So it's basically, you want to look at it as the best impression staff, the consultant came up with based on public feedback as well. And again, because of what might happen on the coast, our transportation system is fairly critical for ferrying supplies to and from, including the Redmond Airport. So it's not in our jurisdiction, but we recognize the importance of various airports. And then not just the county is doing 20-year planning, but you have the cities have TSPs. You also have Central Oregon Environmental Center, or Intergovernmental Council, COIC. You know, you use acronyms all the time, you have to actually spell it out. Yeah, so so they Cascades, East Transit, all these other agencies that have a transportation element in their long-term plans. We want to make sure we're consistent with them. And so they also gave us feedback. And then when we had the timber collapse a couple of decades ago, and suddenly the county was losing money from timber receipts, we enacted a roadway moratorium. It comes up periodically. Do we want to keep the roadway moratorium? That means, are we not adding roads to the county maintained system? And so looking at the consultant and the funding, it's the idea for the recommendation is, yeah, we should maintain the county roadway moratorium. So the circles, that's just basically Sisters, Redmond, and Pine have their own local transportation system plans. And so how did we shape the TSP? We had a technical working group, county staff, our technical peers from their sister agencies, the consulting team. We had 2 public open houses. Those were online to get feedback. We had partner coordination committee meetings. So we reached out to the aforementioned COIC, CET, Bend MPO. We also reached out to the local cities that we work with, as well as ODOT, to come up with what are the issues we all see for transportation in Deschutes County on the county portion of the system. And then one of the most important things, the county has its own bike pit advisory committee, publicly known as BPAC. So we worked a lot with BPAC on bike and ped issues, primarily a lot of bike, some pedestrian, but what do you want to see in the TSP over the next 20 years? So the open house process, the first one, May 2021, but went all right. We liked better. You know, we reach out the traditional way and through the county's, you know, cyber outreach process. We got a lot more in December 2022. And also what we had were a lot of specific suggestions. So the four highlighted in bold are the ones we heard the most. A lot of support for Sunrise Boulevard from the neighbors down there, paving that. A lot of support with some cautions, but mostly support for Deschutes River Woods South Interchange project somewhere between Baker Road and the High Desert Museum. One of the reasons that's important is with wildfire and worrying about evacuation, getting people out. Do we want to send them all to either Baker Road, or there's a one little connection on Pennock Lane that's gated? We really need a higher order facility. That'll be more work required with ODOT to develop that. Probably the one that was the most public comment was the Sisters of Black Creek Ranch bike path. We heard lots and lots of comments. If I had to put a ratio on it, I'd say 75 against and 25 for, but I haven't counted every individual one and done a, you know, matrix, but I'd more that way. And then we've had a lot of support for the Southwest Bend Bike Ped Bridge, which is currently in the TSP by reference to Bend Parks Master Plan, because that's one of their projects. And that would allow people to live in Deschutes River Woods to get across the river without having to go three sides of the square, going up to Reed Market and then across and then down. The way TSP is laid out, introduction, pretty straightforward goals and policies. The need assessments, that was based on Kittleson doing modeling, also working with the Transportation Safety Action Plan, technical support from the road department, how to provide a multimodal system. And then what are the investment priorities based on all that previous information? And then, you know, what are our funding assumptions and what is the total bill going to be? Well, you can clearly read this, I know. But essentially this is, you know, if you're going to build everything, you know, what would it come up to a little over 189 million? That's every possible project you would ever do. Obviously, you're never going to do that. You have a high priority, all the highs, about $43 million. We have various cost sharings from the county and by projects, an intersection change, the change to the roadway itself. Is it county contributing to an ODOT project? What are you doing for sidewalks, bridges? Some of the roadway projects include improvements that will assist bicyclists. They're not always called out specifically as bicycle projects. And that's tables in the TSP along with some explanation in more detail on the individual projects.
Peter and maybe Chris and Cody, there's, you know, elsewhere in here, there's basically a set of assumptions about future revenue to do, you know, to tackle these projects. And if I'm, well, can you kind of coordinate that with this slide? So if we receive that projected funding, which again had a lot of assumptions in it, how far into this list do we get? Do we get all the high and medium projects, or?
I think we get high, medium, and most of the low. I think our projection was in the $160 million range for total revenue. What you're looking at is the expenses, 189. So we're not that far off, and that's why we wanted to present something that was achievable. What will get us over the hump, or certainly either better funding conditions that could occur, or just more aggressive grant funding pursuit. And you know, we're making such grandiose projections on things. It's hard to want to represent with any certainty that, oh, we have to line these up. What we want to do is kind of get in the ballpark, kind of provide more projects than funding, you know, so that those remain in the plan. It could be constructed.
So just what Chris said on the slide. So that's the all projects for county planning and budgeting purposes. We tried to do realistic, not we're gonna manna falling from the heavens. So then you can take this as the board when the road department presents their capital improvement project lists. You can pick and choose based on these priorities. Again, the Transportation Safety Action Plan, which the road department's going to update again, really helped out identifying the high priority, particularly those that are not just volume, particularly safety issues. And then it gives you flexibility for your future intersection and roadway investments, depending on the need funding. Again, these are in the TSP at a larger map, so I'm not going to go through these because they look like gnats on a windshield. But we have, turn lanes, realignment, roundabout projects. So we've kind of got them all by categories. These are your intersection projects. Reconstruction or mod projects, you may take a road that's falling apart, you're reconstructing it, you're building it up to our current standards. You might get some right of way alignment or expansion, modernization. You're going from a dirt road on a county maintained road again to pavement, and then maybe some minor new road alignments. Functional class, that was based on looking at cities typically base it on volume. What your classification scheme is. Counties usually not. We want to get what we call a rural scale grid system, so you're not having to want to add a direction. But it may be a low volume road. And then some roads, we've picked up volume over the years. People have found shortcuts. We look at that. Do we then see that maybe that's not a local road, really it's more functioning as a collector, which is going to have a different construction standard or paving standard. Conversely, could you have a road that now people aren't using? And really why we had it earlier in the TSP is a collector. And really, I'd probably go down to a local, or does the collector that we have us, for instance, the Chief Market Road was a classic case last time where it was a collector and we bumped it up to an arterial because the volumes had shot up so much. So those are, some are based on volume, some are based on direction of travel decisions.
So we've got these functional classification proposed changes, and there were roadway projects and intersection projects on the previous two lists. Are those often coordinated? That we're gonna reclassify this road, and then there's gonna be a roundabout. I know, like I after talking to some people in the La Pine Chamber breakfasts a couple weeks ago, I looked at Huntington Road and I said, okay, we're gonna do a classification change, and I see a roundabout project and some other things.
So there's a high degree of overlap, but there are also some safety projects where maybe you've got bad sight distance. And so even though you're not reclassifying it, you're gonna have a project there. But generally, your projects are on your higher order facilities and they are related to the classification, but not completely. Do you want to add anything, Rich?
No, I think, it's warranting a roundabout because of the volumes.
Right.
The volumes there will dictate that the road itself is probably packaged arterial.
So often they're kind of coordinated or they're lining up together.
The three big functional classification changes kind of holistically in here are roads that in South County that over time have kind of been cobbled together, a series of local access roads that are providing kind of collector-like qualities through there. We've got Sunrise Boulevard that's operating very much like the collector, and the Day Road to Burgess Road corridor, the Whittier and Wolf corridor, north of State Rec. That's multiple subdivisions are driving through local access roads that we're basically accepting within this. And then the third one is the connection between Spring River and South Century through Special Road District 1, which is a county road facility, but county roads through Special Road District 1, but connecting down to South Century again through a series of local access roads that are maintained by the county. But the public's using that very much like the collector, and it's hard to ask people to maintain a collector as a part of a local access road. And so we kind of made those three distinctions. The Oregon Water 1 or Lab 2, I think, is where the other one kind of traverses. So those are, and Sunrise, I think, is the one that's out the most comments. The residents there understand, hey, this project is gonna, Danny has highlighted, we like it, we want to do it now. Basically over here.
So were you just saying that we are going to absorb some local access roads into the county system as part of, okay, because there's that whole description at the end of how we're not.
Correct, yeah, so the big distinction there though is we don't, we can't accept collectors and arterials and not violate the plan. In this case, they're relatively small segments that we're upgrading to collector status, which means the public's using them, not just adjacent homeowners. Okay, we'll be operating as part of our system.
Think of it as we're adopting a route. That's probably the way that we'll think about it. They be cobbled together from various things.
Coupled with, the fact that they'll provide emergency egress in those particularly sensitive areas as well. Highlighting, what other safety issues we're providing in the TSP as far as egress, the interchange, Peter mentioned. South of the Shoots River Woods.
So ODOT, like I said, has their own 20-year plans, so we've adopted many of their projects into our facilities. Some of them were also having a dollar contribution to help out. So for instance, there's a roundabout at the east edge of Sisters that we're contributing toward because so many county residents are coming to and through there. So that's sort of, again, coordination with our state agency, doing more details as ODOT gets closer to building the projects, following their rules and regulations. On to the PEDs. Basically, it's Tumalo and Terrebonne at main areas, sidewalk infill, often related to where schools are, particularly in the Tumalo area. So we just want to make sure that people have a good place to walk back and forth in some of the community activity centers. Bicycle facilities, this again, we've worked a lot with BPAC. The current TSP has designated county bikeways where we have maintenance processes where you smaller rock on the shoulders. So carrying those forward and then working with BPAC, they identified targets for new community bikeway connections. So people can cycle along county roads, not separated multi-use paths, but actual, county roads and some improvements. So the bridge projects, important to make the distinction. These are county maintained bridges. These aren't necessarily private bridges. So the department has a bridge inspection system that they run. What you do with the bridge and when you prioritize.
I do have a question. Back to the bike facilities, Lower Bridge. It's in green. It says Oregon Scenic Bikeways. Does that mean the state is gonna help with that? And how soon can that get done? Because it should have been done like 2 summers ago.
They help by providing signs.
Yes.
When it was
Oh,
originally
signs.
designated and then marketing its use. We don't really, get funding to do that program yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
We raised that question when this state project first began. And so they put the first wave of signs up and we're doing replacement. Yeah.
Just had to ask this.
Fair
It's
question.
pretty dangerous.
Question.
It's dangerous down there because there's so many people that use that road and it's really not wide enough. And it's sometimes curvy. Sorry, you were on the bridges.
Well, and so I'm just thinking big picture. So we're gonna do this, is this the slideshow for Wednesday?
This is very similar, yeah, we're trying to, maybe high level of the project categories could be helpful for now, but we're gonna review all the same information on Wednesday, you're correct.
Yeah. The idea is kind of give the board some background. So that'll give the public more time.
Questions, yeah.
So FLAP is the Land Systems Project. Both Cody and Chris have been really successful at getting FLAP grants for roads on the county system. So that one in green, we have some county roads called forest highways that go through national forests. So FLAP is for facilities that provide access to like the High Cascade Lakes or recreational areas. And it really has been a success story for Deschutes County because it's a highly, highly competitive grant process. So the road department has done really well on getting FLAP grants. Transit, we don't run transit, but we coordinate with the Cascades East Transit for where they want to run their vehicles, where they might want to stop, particularly in Tumalo. So we look at them in terms of where it's a good place for county, so road department versus where's a good place for the community as well. So you want it probably over on Bruce between 5th and 7th. And then safety, which is the most critical component. So the road department did a transportation safety action plan, which I referenced earlier. We use that for help setting the priorities. And again, this is one to try and reduce the number of fatal and serious injury crashes on the county road system. Funding, we've already discussed the funding. I don't know if you want to throw anything else in at all on funding.
Made some assumptions, basically, status quo for the most part. That's very hopeful. The legislature occasionally adjusts the fuel tax. We're assuming that over time, they're going to occasionally adjust it to a manner that correlates with about what we're receiving today. And eat back the impact of inflation. Nothing tremendous in the way of downgrading the fuel state highway funds contribution to us. The system will adjust. And those conversations are certainly on the forefront right now at the state, right? And we're all hearing about ODOT and their balance of maintenance funds. So those are happening. Federally, we don't touch that a lot. The federal gas tax hasn't been increased since I was, in college. So, but we are very fortunate. We do have a capital program. We are investing, you know, in these projects. Projects Commissioner asked about on the list. I mean, we do intend to represent, you know, to the community that, you know, we can construct these in 20 years. We are in that ballpark.
I would say one of the differences between this TSP now and the one that's current, is we had, several, I won't call them wish list projects on that particular TSP, but they were sort of, you know, unfunded but hoped for projects. This one, as Chris has mentioned, they're all reasonably, feasible to achieve based on the funding assumption. You're not gonna get everything, but you're gonna get far, far more than typically happened in the past.
And I just got a couple of funding questions. So we are we're upgrading some roads to collectors. This STBG is a formula program. If we have more miles of collector, do we get more? Or do we just get I don't know how the formula works, but
Yeah. Yeah, but STBG no longer applies to the county because that's been washed through state highway fund. We get state dollars now. And so at a fixed amount. STBG that was the whole part of that funding change bill that went through the last legislative session. You're hearing about it at the MPO because there's a transit component to the MPO, and the state is still providing STBG opportunities to the MPO to help fund some transit stuff.
We're not getting a huge number of new roads, so it's a very small, I mean, if you look at total miles in the county system, it's, you know, it's almost a rounding error, so it's not like we're suddenly quadrupling the number of collector miles we have or anything like that.
but it doesn't, adding collector miles doesn't give us any benefit in terms of state funding allocation.
It may allow us to tap into grant programs for collector and above.
Okay.
Some federal opportunities, especially for, you know, fire prone areas. You know, there's some grants that the Protect grant, other things that kind of speak towards readiness. But it doesn't result in any formulaic increases.
Then the other form of funding question I wanted to ask was, so the state highway fund, gas tax revenue and other things, but you know, gas tax revenue is a big piece of it. We are hoping that there will be some kind of, you know, mileage-based fee structure created to compensate for declining gas tax revenue. Is that one of the, I guess in terms of like policy things to watch and to, you know, weigh in on and engage with, is that like the big one, or are there other things like that that we should be keeping an eye on from a funding policy perspective?
Yeah, I mean, what we want to be careful in watching is if that shift takes place to a mileage-based funding mechanism, that it doesn't decrease our funding, that at least may pull and, you know, hopefully even, you know, maybe a little better than pull. And then that is adjusted with inflation from time.
Did you graduate in 1993?
91, thank you.
Because it said that the last time it was raised was 93, but Oregon has the 8th most gas tax in the nation for gasoline, and then we're 10th most for diesel.
Yeah.
So they actually tax diesel at 24.84 cents.
You do have the lowest sales tax though.
Well, no, it's everywhere.
That's a huge
It's everywhere
difference
else.
Between how Oregon funds big capital projects and other states and local communities.
Chris, are you trying to fudge your age by a couple of years?
Not done in college. I think now.
Did it take two? Okay.
So, yeah, like my senior year was 8th grade, you know. But, you know, the things we have to just monitor is as those adjustments take place. I think, you know, we've been talking about vehicle mileage, fuel or funding mechanisms, as long as I've been in this industry, and the needle hasn't moved much. What's really easy to do is adjust registration fees for certain classifications of vehicles, which Oregon has done. Other states like Texas have done a lot more aggressively. Washington does quite a bit. And, you know, Oregon probably should, you know, I won't say give up on all that work, but at least, you know, quickly adjust registration to account for, lost revenue. A typical vehicle pays about, in terms of what we get out of that gas tax, or maybe total, about $164 a year. It's not a tremendous amount that comes through the gas tax and registration and other forms, to local government. That can easily be adjusted in registration fees and other fees that are already there. That funding can just continue to come in.
So I'm
Fighting inflation is the biggest, thing that we have to be mindful of.
So the legislature is going to fund ODOT so that they're actually going to keep the mountain passes passable this winter, apparently is what I'm hearing.
It's a 2025 conversation legislatively,
Well,
most likely.
I heard that Representative Maddox had a conversation with him last week, and he said he has an email saying that they are going to do it and for this winter. And he does have an email from them and they've got something going, but why don't they adjust the fees now? If we really are that short.
To the legislature.
Yeah.
And that is, it's not an easy task.
Can I just ask one question, just because I get, as a former planner, I can't help not ask. I'm just curious, how are TSPs, whether it's cities or counties or urban or unincorporated communities, addressing microtransit? Are they pedestrian facilities? Are they bicycle facilities? Are they being addressed in TSP updates? I'm just
Like
curious.
policy language.
Yeah, like electric scooters or other
Oh.
small, I'm just curious. curious.
It's in the policy language. It's under.
It is.
Equity or accessibility about working with CET and others about various modes.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, one of the challenges you always have with a 20-year document is vocabulary changes. So, I mean, you do something you think is current, cutting edge in, 2010, and then you show up in 2023, like, well, why didn't you think of that? You're like, well, nobody knew about that until after we were adopted. So again, it's a dynamic moving document, but yeah, the transit, it's, with a, small t, is dealt with, the goals of accessibility, equity, goals and policies. So, building on next question, so what does the county do with this TSP once it is adopted? You work with your local, state, and federal agencies, funding projects and their priorities. We continue to work with our partner agencies on prioritization. You identify projects in the CIP list. When you get to an actual project, there's future public outreach. It's not a one and done. And then during land use planning, if someone's doing, say, a plan of zone change, if there's a program, meaning there's funding identified for a project, they can count on that in their traffic assessment. If there's a project but not programmed, they can't. So that's how it plays into land use for plan of zone changes. And then the board and the planning commission can also use the policies and goals to guide their land use decision and transportation making. For more on upcoming events in this document, I turn to Tarek.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, just giving a brief overview of kind of the planning commission's public review up to this point. So the board's review, their public hearing on the 29th will be the second of two required public hearings for a legislative matter. So to date, I think we have probably about between 170 and 180 public comments, and you've seen kind of the high level themes shown in one of the earlier slides that began during the consultant's public outreach process. We've now kind of added a few other topics to that list. Some things are focused on the Three Rivers community. There's others around the kind of like Island Loop Way as a kind of microcosm of that Three Rivers community. There's fairly diverse, just smaller questions or comments about priority statuses for specific projects, things like that. I would say that those are kind of the big ones. There's some general questions about bike routes and the airport operations, things like that, but we'll go over that in a little more detail on Wednesday, and you'll likely hear a lot of those public comments in person or remotely. But the planning commission review, their initial public hearing was held on August 10th with a continuation of that open record period 2 weeks till 2 weeks later on August 24th. There was a lot of interest, and they really wanted to have a pretty wide open part for our segment of public input. And so then on October 12th, they came back for deliberations, and the planning commission did render a recommendation on that October 12th meeting. Basically, they've recommended that the board adopt the transportation system plan, including the following 5 amendments. The first was that they voted to, or the first amendment was to remove the multi-use pathway connection between the City of Sisters and Black Butte Ranch, which you've heard about before, just as kind of a high-ranging or high-level topic that we've heard about since the beginning of the project. We had 6 commissioners in favor and 1 in opposition to that particular amendment. The second amendment was changing the Baker Road to Lava Butte multi-use pathway connection to be on the west side of Highway 97 rather than the east side. And there was 7 commissioners unanimously in favor for that project.
Before we leave that.
Sure, yeah.
Can I ask a couple questions? So,
Please, yeah.
just to kind of catch us up a little bit.
Certainly.
What are the distinct advantages and disadvantages of the west side versus the east side?
The east side, I can speak to that ODOT's already gone through a fairly preliminary, but pretty robust design phase. And so most, if not all of their design and preliminary materials show that pathway would be aligned on the east side of the highway. And so I can't speak for how that affects their internal processes or how they're going about, dealing with that specific project, but it does really change how their initial designs may have to be handled at this point.
Like to add to you, not
Please,
just
yeah.
design, but also stakeholder involvement. It's a part of that as well, so.
Absolutely, yeah.
We would leave it up to ODOT really to speak to that more. And ODOT actually has, they submitted a fairly substantial letter to the board last week around this specific topic. What their efforts have been to date in terms of activity outreach, where they've gotten to the design that they have today, which does have the path on portions of it on the east side of the highway, portions of it on the west side of the highway.
So this shift to the west side, did they ask for that or express any opinion on that?
Yeah.
Or
So when they did the study originally, I was on the technical advisory committee. They looked at both east and west side for the various reasons that Cody and Chris have mentioned. They looked at both and then they decided, no, we want to put it on the east side. And so that's their preferred alternative. So they looked at both. They didn't have, at that time, they hadn't given that information to the planning commission. So the planning commission didn't know that there was a preferred alternative already when they were doing this. And this was part of deliberations, so they couldn't enter anything in the record. So what they've got now, what you have in the record is this longer background of how they got to the east side of it.
And we are still uploading, we probably received 20 today, so we're still uploading a lot of those comments, but they'll be available for you before that public hearing and during any open record period you all might impose.
2 more questions about these. So these paved separated pathways. Do we even have any role in these projects? I mean, we're not gonna pay for them, we're not gonna build them, we're not gonna maintain them, right? So
Yes.
or are we?
Yes and no. So that's why they're having declaratory ruling, because they may need, there's a question if they need land use approval to do the multi-use path. And so they're gonna have the county hearings officers hearing a declaratory ruling on the 6th of December on that question. But in terms of building and operating, I don't think we're doing any of that. It's just kind of canyon to it.
But one important thing to highlight is this Bend and Lava Butte multi-use path is the only actual multi-use path project that's identified for TSP. These other community connections are more kind of aspirational targets that were, based on recommendations from feedback. But in terms of an actual project, ODOT's Bend to Lava Butte path is the project that's actually identified in TSP. And that project is primarily being funded with FLAP dollars. In terms of construction dollars, no construction dollars from the county or at least presently committed to that project. In terms of operations and maintenance of that path, no, there's no county commitment or involvement with the operations and maintenance of that path.
But it matters for us to have it in the TSP because we might have a land use application associated.
Depending on the categorization of that, which is a lot of what the declaratory ruling is before hearings officer now, is what is this project? If it's separated from grade, is it part of a highway project? Is it a standalone trail project? Depending on the categorization of that category and how it interfaces with forest zoning or different county zoning districts might require land use approval. It also might not, depending on what the hearings officer decides, but that's presently what's before a hearings officer for at least an interpretive question within that, but I think the overarching theme here is that it's an ODOT facility, it's an
Yeah,
ODOT
I'd
project.
say if we're taking a step back, it's in our TSP because ODOT asked us to put it.
And that sort of connects to my other question, which is about the third rail, the Sisters Blackbee Ranch pathway. I'm trying to understand what the significance is of us having it in there or removing it, or, you know, conceivably like a mid path would be keeping it in there and downgrading it to a low priority. I mean, does that matter at all to any of the entities who would actually be building and maintaining that?
It might matter to the Forest Service because it's all on federal land. So the Forest Service has said, because this was a hot button issue in '98 when I first got to enjoy it. And so the Forest Service has just basically said, look, we have our own processes, we have environmental review, we have an EIS. If a third party, why it matters to those who really want it, is if a third party wants to apply for a grant to build it, one of the first things the grant giver asks, is this on an adopted plan? They can say, yes, it's on the plan. High priority obviously looks more favorable than low priority, which is one of the reasons we moved it up. Originally we had it as a low priority. But the other thing to recognize that we've told the public and others who've commented on, it's like, we can put it on our map, but it's on national forest land. So they have their whole environmental review to go through, but it's just if a third party wanted to fund one, or if the Forest Service wants to use that as part of their scoring, they could say, look, it's on an adopted plan as a high priority.
But if we take it out of our TSP, it doesn't kill the project.
No,
Again, it's not a project to begin with. It's
the
a
concept.
target.
But if we have, I guess maybe like another way to look at it, if it's not an RTSP, it doesn't preclude people from moving forward with the project. If the landowner and all these other entities that will build and operate it, if they want it.
ODOT just built, path from, Roble all the way out to Old Bend Road Highway. Our TSP would support extension of that just simply by, hey, we support multimodal community connections as the county is almost part of policy. But there's no project that's identified. It's a statement of support for, kind of that issue inclusion in other entities or agencies, grant funding opportunities. But it's also the board saying, hey, we support this.
And so has it been communicated to all the people who waited?
Oh, yeah.
In opposition that
Yes,
whether it's in the TSP or not, doesn't really mean.
correct.
I think so.
Yes,
The nuance of not nuance, just the blatant fact of the Forest Service owning, I think the entirety of what would be the foreseeable alignment of it does kind of put this in a different route where that is the agent, that's the landowner, that's the lead agency. They do have their own process they'd have to go through. They've been made aware of that, and honestly, a lot of the commenters seem to have been involved with this historically. I think they were aware of past efforts as well.
Like 98, 14, yeah.
Sounds like you might
Yeah.
be just as aware, yeah. Absolutely. Sorry. Yeah.
And then that Roble, the Old Bend Redmond Highway pathway is an example of, this wasn't in our TSP, ODOT did it anyway.
Exactly.
In their right of way.
In the right of way.
with different zoning.
Which most of these will occur, that right of way and be similarly constructed by ODOT through their various programs.
I might just add, Pete, and we'll get into this is in your memo and we'll reiterate this on Wednesday, but there's some other discussion that the planning commission did engage with regarding multi-use pathways. One was a very long-winded sort of deliberative point where they were talking about a full prohibition on multi-use pathways, and while they ultimately did not make it into any kind of recommendation, but that was a deliberative point that they wanted me to convey to the board as something that they ultimately diverged on sort of the details of, but they ultimately found like a full prohibition was not warranted under their review. So just a little bit extra discussion context for the multi-use pathway topic. Just moving through the remaining 3 amendment pieces. The third amendment, these are a little more just straightforward. So third amendment would change the priority status for the Second Street Cook Avenue sidewalks in Tumalo from a medium to a high priority. And that was 6 commissioners in favor with 1 commissioner absent. And then fourth being change of the priority status from the US 20, Highway 20 to the Powell Butte Highway Roundabout project goes from a low to a high priority. Again, 6 commissioners in favor and 1 absent. And then lastly, they voted to change the priority status for the Highway 20 Locust Street Roundabout project from a low to a high priority, and also noting that that project with contributions from Deschutes County, City of Sisters, and ODOT is funded for construction in 2024, again with 6 commissioners in favor, 1 commissioner absent.
So just philosophy wise, if we have low, medium, and high in these projects, we do an annual CIP proposed project list. We start off with high and then just work our way down in the next 10 years. Making sure, yeah, because that's what it is. It's just what we think we can get done in the next 12 months and then budget.
So we present you an annual budget that contains that 1-year CIP. As part of that, a 5-year look ahead, basically, and that's what Cody presents as part of our presentation. It's plugged into the budget.
So then, as I say, it's kind of the high priority projects, kind of picking from that list for the first year or two, and then maybe get the next level after that.
Doesn't item number 4 actually have like a safety issue? Trying to turn left turn from Powell Butte to go west is incredibly impactful, and especially if you're pulling a horse trailer, and there's so many equestrian events out there. I would think that there would be really a safety issue. There's a lot of traffic out there.
So just kind of wrapping up, next steps for the TSP's review process for the board is that there is a public hearing 2 days from now on the 29th. I think it's at 10 in the morning. So we'll be presenting sort of the public, just a kind of reiteration of what we've had today, a bit of a review of the public process, public testimony, and the input received. You'll hear from the consultant on that day. This whole team, minus Peter Russell, will be there as well for any questions. And really, after the public hearing, there's some options for the board, but you could have an open record period where additional public testimony can be gathered. At some point, there will be a deliberations phase that is presented to the board, and that's really when there might be any wordsmithing or other incorporation of the planning commission's amendments or your own amendments at that point. And ultimately, this culminates with the board either adopting the transportation system plan as presented, as amended, or you can deny the TSP itself. And so with that, we're available for any questions you might have. And thank you again for your time today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Still on this paved pathways topic, one final question is, so if we recommend that the Lava Butte to Bend trail is built on the west side of the highway, then that doesn't really matter either.
Cody mentioned ODOT submitted a 4-page letter, really kind of breaking down the history of that. I think that'd be worth a good solid read and reread.
Okay.
I think they had an opinion about just that. Yeah, I know they would like our support, given the process they've gone through. That's mostly what they're asking for in that letter.
Okay.
The things we
So
mentioned.
I mean, as staff presented this, we did, identifying that project in the TSP, we weren't giving those kind of particulars to it. This was the planning commission, this particular thing. And again, there was kind of a procedural issue here. ODOT couldn't come in and present additional information after the hearing closed, saying the planning commission and their decision.
And one of the things we've done in the spirit of cooperation with ODOT is saying, look, if the DR doesn't go the way you want, you can always propose a text amendment to our code. So we divvy up road projects in class 1, 2, and 3. You got to get land use for class 1 and 2. Class 3, which are, low level projects with no real major transportation implications, don't require a land use permit. So if you had in the list of things that are class 3, comma, multi-use path or bike ped facilities or similar, comma,
Anything right away or
then you're completely out of it.
Right.
But again, that's another process. So planning commission, board, whether opponents would feel it higher than that would be another question. That's another option given them.
my final question was, in terms of stakeholder input, and public input. I know the freight industry is not super excited about roundabouts on certain highways. Did they engage in this process at all?
Not in the county's process, they engage directly with the state. And they don't tend to show a lot of concern about roundabouts on the local system, it's on the state highway system. Where they tend to engage, and ODOT has a process where they have to engage, freight advisory committee.
Right. I mean, there were more on Highway 20. Coast, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole host. The two additional sisters. Yeah, I guess the Powellview would probably be the next one, so. Okay. I think 4 have been recently opened.
I just drive in circles now. But I'm so happy.
Get a little busy.
No, well, have to. Well, sometimes I go all the way around because just, but the really good news is like Old Bend Redmond Highway, that is so, I used to see the line of traffic and I would, you just so,
Dangerous.
oh my gosh, you just get so worried and you see people like dashing across when they really shouldn't be. And I've just had lots of really good feedback over it. So I think they did a really excellent job. The people that started the last got done right, everything was done pretty much on time, I believe.
Yeah, it's working well.
It must have been a great job, Chris. Thank you.
A lot of people, ODOT especially.
Okay, well, thank you, ODOT.
Okay.
All right, if there's no further questions, thank you very much, commissioners. Really appreciate your time. We'll see you on Wednesday.
So our schedule's slipping a little bit here, like a whole hour, it was like, having good discussions today, so just acknowledging that. Item 5's safe parking program. For World Shoots.
Peter and Stephanie are gonna join.
Yeah.
Work on it. Still trying to share my screen. It's been a while. Oh, there we go. Slideshow. All right, I've worked closely with Stephanie and Peter on the draft board orders. The slide will kind of give a summary of the Bend program, the Redmond program, and then we'll talk about the proposal for the county. And then the last couple of slides will walk the board through some decision matrix. The City of Bend Safe Parking Program has 2 different levels. The first level, they call it overnight camping. It's up to 3 vehicles. No city authorization or application is required. The property owner must be a business, nonprofit, or a public agency. The program requires access to sanitation, including a bathroom, hand washing, and trash disposal facilities. And under this overnight camping, no fee may be required for the people that participate in the overnight stays. The second level is called transitional overnight parking accommodation. There is an application process. It's applied through the city manager's office. They have to submit a plan for access to the bathroom, hand washing, trash disposal. Also, they must have case management or supervision. There's an asterisk because that's a different piece or a different requirement than the previous program, that case management and supervision. There must be notification to the immediate neighbors. Under this program, there's up to 6 vehicles and or temporary huts or tents. Then there's a provision for the transitional overnight parking that public entities may allow more than 6 vehicles or huts or tents. And you'll recall when there's discussion about the south or the Managed camp and right next to 97 in South Bend. It was under this program where, since the public entity owned the land, we were able to, the proposal would allow more than 6 vehicles. That's a quick summary of the Bend program. For the city of Redmond, they just have one program. There is an application process. It's limited to up to 6 vehicles. There also must be a plan for bathroom, hand washing, trash disposal. They require case management supervision. I know the board is familiar with the Redmond program because the county is a participant, both in terms of funding and a landowner. In the city of Redmond, it's allowed at religious institutions, nonprofits, public agencies, and commercial property. It's not allowed on residential property. And for Redmond, it's only vehicles. They do not allow the tents or huts. So for discussion with the board, there are 2 draft board orders.
Did you have a trailer in Redmond?
I believe that counts as a vehicle.
But a trailer, you'd have to pull it. It'd have to be operable.
Yeah, I'll check.
Going back to that little asterisk, public entities under the Bend program may allow more than 6 vehicles or huts or tents. Does that mean the public entity needs to be the landowner, or does that mean a public entity could operate a safe parking location?
I read it as the landowner. And then the limitation in terms of how many, it's based on the size of the parcel.
So going to the landowner, what about like a lease arrangement?
That would probably be eligible as well. I'll double check on that.
It's, one of the comments we received, suggested, well, if you adopt this outside within a mile of the UGB, it would make it possible to do something at the Gales property that we've talked so much about. But at first reading of the city of Bend's policy, my thought was, well, that would make it possible to do 6 vehicles, which is very valuable, but it's not nearly the scale that that property owner expressed openness to doing. But if we could do some kind of a partnership with a public entity, then maybe that 6 vehicle or temporary huts tents is not a constraint.
Yeah, I'll look that up. Unless Stephanie or Peter know offhand.
I think that, so the programs, City of Bend, City of Redmond, our orders are aimed to be consistent with House Bill 2006. So, and I printed it out and brought a copy here. So there's a section 5 that talks about inside an urban growth boundary. We're not proposing anything under section 5. We're looking at section 6, which does not actually limit the number of vehicles. So that's going to be a policy decision that the board makes. But it just says that it may allow any public or private entity to allow overnight camping. So that, if I was an entity, I couldn't just go to Walmart and say, hey, I'm going to provide overnight parking on your property. You'd have to have some sort of an agreement with the owner of the property.
Right.
But, that subsection 1 of section 6, any political subdivision, that would be the county, may allow any public or private entity to allow overnight camping by homeless individuals living in vehicles on the property of the entity. So that brings it full circle. So we're we're the political subdivision, and we're gonna say you, public or private entity, can allow overnight parking on your property. Clear as mud, right?
Well, I mean, back in the day, there was all kinds of concerns about EFU land, EFU zoning. But your reading of this section of House Bill 2006.
No, that's not correct. So there, you know, if you look at the whole bill, if you look at section 6, it's talking about emergency shelter. And it says you can do emergency shelter notwithstanding the ORS provisions, 195, 197, 215, or 227. We don't have that carve out for homeless homeless individuals doing the overnight camping. So we're still, you know, when we get to our proposed orders here, we're still not making that available for resource lands. And Peter can weigh in also. We've kind of been around on that one a few times.
Well, that was well said.
Yeah.
The county's interpretation in coordination with CDD and coordination with legal counsel is that to the extent that the board wants to take advantage of House Bill 2006 as summarized quite well by Stephanie, you need to focus on non-resource lands. And that those opportunities are limited to those that are living in vehicles.
Right.
To the extent that there's interest in tents and camping by other means, CDD certainly has very strong concerns about the challenges of doing that, and the liability that comes with staying in those kinds of facilities, for lack of a better term. So it's really carved out for staying with, if one has a vehicle that they're living in, subject to the standards and kind of prerequisites to, you know, in terms of an agreement with the property owner and having some of those kind of basic sanitary access to those facilities for hand washing and sanitation and garbage and whatnot.
Okay, so you could do safe parking just outside the urban growth boundary for vehicles.
Correct.
As long as it's
right, there you go.
As long as-
R10 or something.
And as long as it's not farm and forest land.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because section 5 is limited to inside the urban growth boundary. And that's when you can do tents or yurts. We don't have that ability here. We're only under section 6, which is safe parking, camping in vehicles. Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like, when we discussed this before, the determination was HB 2006 will let you do indoor shelter on rural residential school plans, but not outdoor shelter. Is that?
It was let you do emergency shelter, which is
Right.
which is outlined in sections 1 through 3, I think, of the House Bill
Yeah.
2006.
Right.
And that's where those carve outs are laid out.
Right. Yeah, and emergency shelter is
A cluster building.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Kim's correct.
So,
It's
okay.
defined in HB 2006, what emergency shelter is. And that's not what we're addressing here.
So safe parking,
Safe parking.
okay, rural residential, as long as.
MUA 10, yeah.
Okay.
It's important that Eric has identified numerous zones that are non-resource. That are recognized as non-resource zones within 1 mile of Ben's urban growth boundary. So there's more than just rural residential.
Right.
To the extent that someone is interested.
So the proposal has 2 draft board orders. Because they're board orders, this is not land use. In general, the goal was to be as consistent as we can to the land around Bend, to be as consistent with the Bend program, and the same for Redmond, so that we have consistency. There are some proposed differences that I'll point out as we go through the matrix. There's the board order, which is 2023-052, is within an urban growth boundary. And then the second board order is within a mile of an urban growth boundary. And now for some of the differences. We're first going to talk about board order 052, which is within the urban growth boundary. The topic, oh my God, battery's running low. Topic is, should. Okay, should tents, yurts, huts, fabric structures be included? The proposed board order says yes. Or, well, let me go, the city of Bend allows that within the urban growth boundary. And the city of Redmond does not. There's a difference between the two cities, safe parking programs. So the Deschutes County draft allows tents and yurts and huts within the Bend urban growth boundary, but not for Redmond. So it's consistent with both cities, but acknowledges there's a difference between the two cities. And as Peter stated earlier, tents and yurts and huts are allowed within the urban growth boundary, but not outside. But since this board order is within the UGB, it allows it for Bend, but not for Redmond. Second question is, should safe parking for 3 or less be allowed without county approval? The city of Bend, oh, there goes my my surface died. Does everybody, do the commissioners have the hard copy? Yeah. All right.
Organized.
Part of the agenda.
So the city of Bend for 3 or less vehicles allows it without city approval. What staff is recommending is that we would be different here, that we would require it. Regardless of, we would require it for 3 or less vehicles. Redmond requires city approval for 3 or less. We recommend this being reviewed by the county so that we can make sure that the sanitation is being required, that sanitation requirements are being met. Next, I'm going to board order 053. That's outside the urban growth boundary, or really it's a mile.
Within a mile.
Within a mile. The question is, should tents, yurts, and huts structures be included? The staff recommendation is that we don't allow it because of state land use. It's outside the urban growth boundary. The next question is, should safe parking for 3 or less be allowed without county approval? Staff is recommending that we require county approval for those. So again, we can check for sanitation, with the sanitation requirements are being met. And
on that one, Eric, can you comment on kind of monitoring and compliance? Like, who's doing that part?
For the cities. Or who would do it?
Who would do it for us if we required?
Yeah, the way we've talked about doing it is it would be county administrator approval or designee. That might be me. Congratulations. What we would do is
Yeah.
but I don't want to assume anything.
Come on, Nick.
Most likely the applications will come in through the county administrator's office, and then we would route it to the different departments that have for input, much like we do for the risk management event permits. Based on that input, we would check and make sure that everything was submitted, that the sanitation was being provided, and then we would issue a permit. There probably wouldn't be a whole lot of monitoring unless we received complaints. If we started hearing complaints from neighbors that the sanitation wasn't being provided, then we would either go out there and check, and then we could revoke that permit.
But we wouldn't be sending our deputy county administrator on a monthly basis out to a site to check to see if they have a porta potty.
No.
Okay.
We got complaints, might send.
We'll send Nick out.
Out or I've got code enforcement or.
Likely it would be complaint basis.
Yeah.
Something of that nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with the idea that we would have approval to ensure that it's happening, but I don't want this to be too administratively cumbersome.
Yeah, we would not want it to be administrative cumbersome. Next question is, should safe parking be allowed on resource lands such as exclusive farm use? Under the proposed board order outside the urban growth boundary, it's limited to non-resource land because of state land use issues. But I would like to note that the Gales property is currently zoned EFU. There has been discussions from the Gales, our representative working with the Gales about trying to change the zoning.
They're having their soils work done right now.
Okay. And I have communicated with the representative working with them, and I just let them know that they would likely need to consult with the land use attorney, and that it can be a very cumbersome process. Also, I know that there's been discussion about a safe parking site that's owned by Event Parks and Rec out by Big Sky Park. And that also is EFU. Then there's a couple of general discussion items, and that is whether to have an application fee. And talking to both the cities of Bend and Redmond, they don't charge an application fee because they want to encourage this program. Also, typically you charge an application fee in order to recover the costs of administering the program. So if we were to do that, the application fee would probably be pretty high. So the recommendation is to not charge an application fee. Item number 2 is, should the county program allow hosts to charge people to camp? Under both Bend and Redmond, they don't allow a charge to the people that are camping. In discussions with our internal group, there was concern that if there's a fee charge that would be a barrier to safe parking, so you no longer have a low barrier program. And also then it starts to look more like recreational camping.
Looking ahead, like Rick Russell's program at the additional 10 acres at Oasis Village, he's actually talking about charging something for those people. This really isn't going to be applicable to that program, is it? That's out there in the future.
Oasis Village is in the city, isn't it?
I know it is in the city, so that would come from the city of Redmond then. That if he wants to charge, he would be allowed by the city of Redmond. Okay.
And that's envisioned more as a longer term and transitional than shelters. So I don't think Rick Russell would classify that as safe park, the 10 acres. I mean, but kind of along those same lines, the concept there is that people who are a little bit farther along in their steps out of homelessness are in a little bit more stable place. It actually is, it can be beneficial to charge them at some rent. And so I wonder if we could make the, nuance this a little bit and make it something more like, you can't charge people to safe park for the first 6 months or something like that. So that, if there's people who are, finding these safe parking locations as, their transitional housing, basically, that they can start to get used to, paying some amount of rent and but presumably whoever administers the program would also be plowing those funds back into beneficial services and facilities. That would be one question I'd have is could we phrase this provision that way? That there's after a certain period of time, you can charge somebody something.
Yeah, I think it's a board policy
Yeah.
decision, just to keep in mind that the piece about looking at like a recreational camping facility, and then all of a sudden you create a barrier, so it's no longer a low barrier. But I see it more as a board policy decision. There's also had discussions with the representative from the Gale property about whether or not they could require certain activities or chores to be done We decided not to put too much information in the board order. There can be rules, but we didn't really want to get into administering that. So somebody could have a safe, there can be rules with safe parking even with low barrier. And that could be making sure that their sites are cleaned up. And whether or not that extends to broader community work in that area, we kind of wanted to stay out of. And then the last general discussion item is House Bill 2006 allows public entities or religious institutions to offer overnight camping without restriction. But it's either doesn't matter if it's inside or outside the UGB, so it carves out specifically for religious institutions. And does the board want to open it up broader to allow that? Actually, it's public entities and religious institutions.
That was amended. So section 6 originally was allowing churches, synagogues, or religious institutions. And then they took that out. And so now it broadly says any public or private entity may be allowed to allow overnight camping by homeless individuals living in vehicles of the property, on the property of the entity. So it's not limited. State laws already said it can be broader than religious. I mean, I guess the county could make a decision to narrow it, but I don't know why we would. I mean, I'm not the policymaker. So.
Anything else to add, Peter?
I don't.
So that's a summary of the two proposed board orders.
So that's the two churches that surround the Gales property then, because they are outside the UGB. And
Yeah.
we could have an effect on them. They could actually have the same parking per our ruling then, or can they have it already?
But are they in the EFU zone or are they in a non-residential?
I'll have to look at their.
Yeah, that's kind of the kicker.
I think they're EFU.
Are they EFU?
Yeah, so they would have to qualify under the emergency shelter
Right.
aspect, which is what this ordinance
Yeah.
is not addressing.
Right.
And under the emergency shelter provisions, you can't even do indoor shelter.
No, it's broader. The emergency shelter is the building or cluster of buildings that provides shelter on a temporary basis. And so the county can approve an application for development or use of land. So that actually sounds very land usey to me, for an emergency shelter, notwithstanding the zoning laws, essentially, the state resource land protections.
Emma,
What do you think?
I was just gonna say, there are limitations though. as
Oh,
far as
sure,
where they can-
absolutely.
They can be placed as far as in the UGB or in the.
Right, yes, yeah, I should have I made that clear too, yeah. Inside the UGB or in an area zoned for rural residential.
so maybe I misspoke.
Yeah.
For a church to be used as an emergency shelter, it can't be it can't be
In a
on a resource zoned location. So I misspoke.
Probably a lot of the big world churches are on EFU, because that's what allowed them to build
Yes, and there's,
as a congregation.
and the state law allows under our LUPA, right? For churches to be, for religious institutions to be located where there
Oh,
are
that's interesting too.
similar uses that have similar impacts.
Well, so then that item 3 for the churches. Yeah, what does that allow? There's not much there, because most churches in rural are gonna be on EFU, so that just takes them right off. Then it says overnight camping. Is it the same safe parking, or is that something different? I guess that's the question.
Overnight parking is safe parking in section 6, if that's what you're asking, yeah.
Well, this item 3 on this top of this list says overnight camping.
I don't.
Parking.
Yeah, well, that's.
Well, yeah, that's, we have
Is that the
used the
same safe
terms
parking?
colloquially, overnight camping, safe parking, overnight park, overnight camping, yeah.
So in this
Because it does
scenario-
not, section 6 is not allowing, the use of, tents and yurts, huts and fabric, structures. So really, section 6 is only living in vehicles.
So, we're here to make some decisions today on
No.
this.
This is just to bring
This
up the
work
discussion.
session,
And
work
yeah,
session.
we're want to answer your questions. It's looking for some.
So is it impossible then for those two churches to be allowed? I mean, does that have to come from the legislature again because if they're on EFU?
Or some.
They can rezone the land like the Gales are trying to do. Or we could actually facilitate that and support that work for various landowners.
So I was referring to, are we gonna make any decisions or discussion about these, decision areas is what I was thinking.
Yeah, we're happy to spend the time and walk the board through these or.
How far do we want to go with this today? I guess that's the next step.
It's not land use, so it's,
Yeah. Yeah.
you get to have the ability to have a far more open conversation for guidance for administration. Than you would otherwise.
I'd be happy to spend half hour, 45 minutes going through these questions and approving of policy. But
Well, I'm thinking time wise, maybe we table this and get back to it at the end of the meeting, just to, digest, we get these other items through here too. Okay. That's not the commission.
That's fine.
Okay.
I
So
think I
yeah,
have- I think I have
that's it for
4
that
o'clock
topic
on
for
something
now.
else,
then.
But I can tell the 4 o'clock, It's fine.
We're gonna come back to this.
Oh, I have clear and objective standards meeting up front.
Oh, yeah.
That's important too.
We're gonna come, well, it'll go quick here now. We'll come back to it.
Alrighty.
Item number 6, treasury report. Thanks for joining us.
Back here.
Very welcome. Meeting discussion this afternoon.
Yeah.
I'll
See where we go with that.
try to expedite things a little bit.
Thanks for standing by.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Bill Kinnan, Shins County Treasurer. I'll provide a few high-level economic overview in terms of what's happened over the last 30 to 45 days. I think to follow up, or actually the leading story, I guess, would be that Congress barely avoided shutdown due to an 11th hour settlement to extend funding on November 16th through a continuing resolution process whereby they agreed to extend funding for essential government services, defense, human services, et cetera, through mid-January, and then other government programs through mid-February. So they're doing kind of a divide and conquer. Legislation was approved without stringent budget cuts demanded by many Republicans, which appears to set up a very acrimonious process to establish full year funding in early 2024. So we basically kicked the can down the street for another 45 days, and we've got a lot of really heavy lifting to do in early January to get to a point where we've got an approved budget for the remainder of 2024. With the announcement that inflation lowered to 3.2% for the month of October, this provided stimulus to market expectations that the Fed has reached a terminal rate, which is being debated, and diminished expectations for another rate hike in mid-December. We've had some really strong economic data over the last week or so. So I think that remains to be seen as to whether or not policymakers can pull off a soft landing without tipping the economy into a recession. And there's also issues related to whether the higher for longer rate policy that they intend to leave rates higher to make sure that inflation is dampened down will extend into late 2024. The challenge remains, again, with a pause in September, November, and an expected pause at their next meeting on December 13th. This may cause further uncertainty if investors assume that has reached a terminal interest rate level, and if inflation remains stubbornly high, begin to question the committee's resolve to reinstate price stability. So it's kind of a darned if you do and darned if you don't scenario. The October jobs report reported nominal payroll growth of 150,000 new jobs, which was less than half the 336,000 jobs that were created in September. The overall unemployment rate ticked up slightly to 3.9% for October, but it's still essentially a full employment. Nationally, monthly housing data shows more strength. While October housing starts rose 7% to 1.372 million. They actually rose 0.2% from a year ago. Building permits were at 1.487 million, which was up 1.1% from September. So we're starting to see a little bit of strengthening on the housing side. The significant decline in the CPI to 3.2% had a rather important impact on longer term rates, which the average 30-year mortgage rate dropped from 7.57% last month to 7.36% in October. These higher rates, again, were having an impact on housing activity, and hopefully with a lower rate, we're going to start seeing a little bit more housing activity across the board. I know how that distills back to the local level. The October Beacon report showed Bend's area median sales price declined slightly to 735,000 for the month, which doesn't seem like much, but at least it's moving in the right direction. 121 total sales in October, 27 sales, 22% were above $1 million. Also 34 of these sales were cash transactions, which has been a trend over the last few months. There's a 2-month supply of homes currently listed with only 14 days listing for properties that were sold. Bend area single family home building permits ticked up slightly to 51 permits for the month, which was up from 50 on the prior month. Redmond statistics show a median sales price of 520,000, which was up from the prior month, but down from the 542,000 in August 22, which was our seasonal high point. And they are currently sitting on a 3-month supply. Redmond area permits were 32 for the month, declining from a yearly high of 35 in May. Most sales in the Redmond area were in the $400,000 to $500,000 price point, which again seems to define affordable housing for the region, and it really isn't available in Bend. So.
One question, so the figures are all related to single family dwelling permits, is that right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, what they track, they don't track multi-unit or commercial. So these are single family permits, and they're within the confines of either Bend or Redmond. So they're not tracking rural activity.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious because that's what I primarily hear from city managers across our region is that most of the housing being built now is multi-family.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Which is terrific. So we may continue to see a decline in single family, but that may not be reflective of the number of units actually being built.
Well, and I think the one of the agenda items on Wednesday is the Jack Straw.
Yes.
Multi-use exempt property and that's fairly typical of what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Is that they're larger, either national or regional developers that are building for the long term. And they're willing to invest in Bend right now, even though the market dynamics have changed quite a bit in that market space. So I think we're going to start to see a higher vacancy with some of those newer, especially market rate housing projects that are coming online. So. Yeah, that's proven out with some of the economic data that's out there right now.
So you're saying we finally caught up with production of multifamily housing to the point where there could be a little bit of vacancy?
I believe that the number of units that are coming online right now are going to outstrip demand for market rate housing. That, again, a number of these projects are fairly expensive projects to get into. And so there's a little bit of a dynamic going on there right now where I think we're going to tip that portion of the housing supply into an unbalanced position. So, and yeah, more to come there. But again, some of the data that I have access to shows that there's, again, larger developments that are going to be built for the long term, not necessarily to satisfy short-term market demand.
Bill, can you get the numbers for a number of apartments that have been built and actually opened this year in Bend? Because I've heard from people in the community that they've added like hundreds of apartments here and hundreds of
I think
apartments.
the true number, and I don't have that exact number in front of me, but it's probably between 1,500 and 2,000 units over the last probably 12, 18 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of new units that have come online. There's other projects that are in the development stage right now that haven't gone forward with building permits, but they're going through financial viability to determine whether or not to move forward. But yeah, it's a fairly significant issue right now.
And rental vacancy rates of 0.2% or 0.1% are ridiculous.
They are ridiculous. But
So a little bit of relief on that actually could be a good thing.
yeah, it actually, and again, I think it's gonna take a lot of these projects, it's gonna take 12 to 18 months before, or longer, before they're actually ready for occupancy. So. Patty, if you're Commissioner Dare, if you'd like, I can follow up, but, yeah, that's, we're TV here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But
I'm
I'll
curious.
follow up on that and I'll give you.
Yeah, I would just, because I've just heard it's so significant, if you actually find a way to pull that number up, could you do like 21, 22, 23?
Yeah, I'll go,
We're going the right way.
I'll do at least, probably a 2-year look back on that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you have to.
I mean, just another piece of that story, the long range planners at the city of Bend are saying that the next time they do an urban growth boundary expansion, they're going to specifically bring in land for single family homes because they feel like a lot of the multifamily housing need has been hit in the last couple of years, so.
Yeah, and we still have the big, and I'm trying to, the big project down in the Old Mill District that has been, presented. They haven't obviously broken ground yet, but that's, I think over 1,000, housing units in that project. Yeah. So, any other questions on economic activity? Okay, without further ado, then I'll, dive into our monthly treasurer's report. For the month of October, portfolio balance was 301.8 million at month end, which was an increase of 52.8 million from September, and obviously boosted by a significant influx of tax receipts. Timing's going to be skewed just a little bit in terms of tax turnover, but certainly we've seen a significant increase in cash inflows, primarily due to tax receipts. It's an increase of 36.8 million year over year. Net investment earnings were 528,000 for the month, which was 20,000 higher than last month and 235,000 higher than a year ago. And this is again reflective of the higher rate environment and also growth in the portfolio. All portfolio category balances are well in policy guidelines. The LGIP rate was again increased at 5% on October 16th, where it remains today. We'll have to wait and just kind of see that is very much a short-term rate. And so it is subject to basically short-term investment yields within the LGIP pool. The average portfolio yield continues to climb and now stands at 3.06%. And again, we are calculating that yield on a weighted average basis. The portfolio has a weighted average time to maturity of 0.81 years, which is slightly shorter than the prior month. This is a function of the greater balances kept in short-term funds, both the LGIP and bank balances. This short portfolio duration will lengthen with recent economic or investment activity out to roughly 3-year maturities. I've been pretty active over the last probably 3.5 weeks in terms of investing out on the longer end of the yield curve. So you're going to start to see an impact on the portfolio duration. And I think that is it. Again, trying to keep it short, sweet. Any questions on any of that?
We did that, First Interstate Bank sweep account. Has that come in play at all?
Yeah, it's working well. And actually it's given us greater flexibility to not move money back and forth as often from the bank to the LGIP account. Because basically we're generating the same yield in both. anything over the $9 million
Especially
threshold.
at tax time, right?
Yeah, it's worked out. Yeah, it's worked out really well. So that was a good move to make at the time that we did. Again, that's gonna be, I believe they were gonna look at that within 6 months of establishment. And depending on where rates are and obviously their need for deposits, I would expect that program will be modified at some point, but in the meantime, it's working out well. That's it. Anything else?
If inflation cools down, maybe we'll catch up a little bit.
Let's be hopeful.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Finance. And you're probably the one using the sweep account more than him, right? That we're really moving money.
We are transferring,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. But it all flows together. We all work together, so that's great. So, good afternoon, Commissioners. Robert Tintel, Chief Financial Officer. Before I get to the monthly report, I want to give you an update on our bond sale that took place the week before Thanksgiving. We actually had a successful bond sale. Well, to break the headline, we ended up going out for having our bid, and there were 17 bids received, which is a really high number. It was a competitive bid. And in fact, Duncan Brown, our financial advisor, said I can't recall ever seeing this many bidders show up for a competitive sale. Anecdotally, he thinks 14 or 15 is the most he's seen anywhere previously. 17 is incredible and a reflection of the county's strong credit rating, which itself is a reflection of county's financial management. So,
There you go.
and that for me, again, and I've been through this before, there's been, I'd say 5 of them, so having 17, it was impressive to see. So it's good that our financial advisor could back that up. So, well, I guess the headline is we got a rate at aggregate 3.86 is our rate on that. Just want to take you through the journey of our discussions as a reminder a little bit. When we first talked about this and we got our long range projection, and when we built our 25 budget, it had 5.075 as the interest rate, as you remember, and we knew it would be high. Then when I came back for the resolution on September 13th, we talked about a rate at 3.96. And we know the market has volatility in it. Then on October 19th, we got this is like a month before our sale, November 16th. We got some updated estimates from our advisors, and they said, well, we think the rate's gonna be maybe as high as 4.56 now. So at that time, we pulled out the 2013 bond refunding, which was about $5 million. We were refinancing our 2013 bond as part of this project. And with the rates going that high, it wasn't worth it. So we pulled out that refunding bond. Well, then, good news for us, on November 14th, they had just come out with some new market data, like our inflation data was cooler than they anticipated. And we had increased unemployment numbers. There was no government shutdown. And it was a quiet day for a week of municipal bond sales. Therefore, the rates dropped to where our advisors thought it might be around 4%. So 2 days before the actual sale, we re-engaged for the refunding of the 2013 bond, again, refinancing, so we could save on interest costs, and we included it. And then when it came time for the sale, the final bid came through. The winning bidder was 3.86. Now that's aggregate. The courthouse rate is actually, let me get this here.
So you did add back the 2013 bond refund?
Yes, yep. The courthouse rate was 3.93 and the effective true interest cost for the refunding is 3.51. Part of that, why that has a lower rate, is because we're refinancing it, but we're holding the money in an escrow account up to 90 days, earning interest on that before we pay off the other bonds. That way we recoup more investment earnings that help lower the effective interest rate on that. So still aggregate rate between the two projects, 3.86, which is really great. We were budgeting, we did come down from our original budget, but we were budgeting $1.6 million annually in debt service payments. With this rate, now it goes to on average 1.5 million. So 100,000 a year, but over 20 years, the savings add up. Now, as far as the debt savings that we have from refunding the 2013 bonds. Again, of $5.4 million. That saves us in debt service payments of $404,000 over the remaining 15 years that we refinanced, or $27,000 per year. Now that debt service is paid half by general fund, half by sheriff's office. So we'll share in that savings of about $27,000 per year. So half will split between each of us. Just so you know, a benchmark of net present value savings is, if you want to refinance, you should have a net present value savings. So what's the value of the money, the savings today, not just over the life? But it's, if it's at least 100,000, that's where a benchmark is. We came in at 316,000. Or if you do it on a percentage savings, it's a benchmark is 2%, and this came through at 5.33%. So when you look at the benchmarks, it was a good idea to do the refinancing, even though again, it seems nominal, but every bit helps in the budgets, and it's just like you'd refinance your own home.
Yeah, that's why people aren't selling.
Yeah, it is.
Right? When you have 2.75 interest mortgage, why would you want to sell for 7.37?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to.
Yeah, it would ruin your payments.
That's right. Now, there, I did want to, yeah.
Robert, so getting a rate of 3.93% for the courthouse. You said save us $100K a year in debt service.
Yes.
What's the cumulative savings against?
Yeah, it was
previous projections.
About $2 million, because 100,000 a year over 20 years. Yep. And so soon, when we get to the mid-year budget meeting, Dan will present a new financial forecast, and that has that all built into it already. So we'll talk about a lot of the details when we get there as well. One last thing on the refunding, we actually took the second highest bid. The first bid, they had a material misstatement in their bid. And after talking with bond counsel, attorneys, everyone involved, we went with the second highest bid because if they didn't make that material misstatement, they would have been 11th in the ranking. But even with the second highest, we were 1.1 basis point difference, not 1%, but 1.1. So the winning bid was 3.857. The next bid was 3.868. So very close. And with 17 of them, they were all just within a basis point or two. So again, gets back to the competitive nature and the strong financial backing that we had with our AA1 rating. So kudos to the board's decisions on our financial situation.
I think we have to thank a lot of people though, like Wade Lowry, you know, that set us up so long ago. And then he came back and helped us out. You know, we really have to be appreciative. All those really conservative decisions, especially like, remember when COVID happened and we went really conservative. And yeah, and thank you for coming here from Lane County.
That's right. No, it was good. And they highlighted our strong reserves. And so that's why we'll focus a lot on this budget season about our reserves and where we're at and where we need to be and where we need to maintain. So we maintain that high credit rating as well.
Robert, who got the bid?
Oh, yeah, Morgan Stanley. Thank you. Morgan Stanley was the winning bid for that.
Okay, let's hope we don't read about them in the news, right?
Only good things.
Yeah.
That's right. All right, so now I'll move on to the financial report. And again, this is as of October 2023. You should have that in your package on page 159. Starting off with the general fund dashboard that you see here. Depicted on that page and the comments up above, the revenue in the year to date, the general fund is 7.4 million or 16.6% of budget. And by comparison, last year, the revenue was 6.2 million or 14.2% of budget. We are 33% into the year. So expenditures you would anticipate maybe about 33%, and same with revenue. As you know, our tax revenue comes in mostly starting in November. However, I do want to point you to the graph that's near the bottom of the page, monthly revenues. And you can see under period 4, which is October, has last year's the green bar, and then the blue bar is the current year actuals. So you can see that we actually received more tax revenue in October than we did in the prior year. So more people paid it appears more people paid earlier. It's not just the dollar amount. And we'll look at that when we get to the general fund page.
We typically have, use an assumption about kind of delinquency, like kind of what level of delinquency we might encounter. Do you have a sense of whether we're doing pretty good or on our assumption or better or worse?
Yes, we budget at 96%, which takes into account the 3% discount. And then also there's 1%. Ultimately, though, our collection rate is around 99.9% because of, with the properties that ended up, if they go into foreclosure, it pays off all the taxes. So sometimes it's a timing issue of when we get the money in. And that's why, and I'll point out when we get to the general fund page, you have current year taxes and then you have prior year taxes that always come in. And those are for the delayed delinquent accounts that we still collect on eventually. On average, by November, so this is as of October, but by November, we collect 92% of our taxes by November 30th.
This is, our assessed value base is coming in larger than anticipated for this
That
year
is
as well.
correct.
So,
Yep. And we'll talk about that in just a moment too again. Next page on page 160 is the FTE count. The total at the bottom is 1.24596, which is an increase of 0.2 FTE. And that was just an increase in health services. Not a lot of change from the prior month. Just want to highlight community justice. They still have 4 positions vacant. Sheriff's office, 41.25 vacant. Adult parental probation, 6, solid waste, 11. And again, those were new positions added this year in solid waste. 911 at 5.43. So up slightly from just the 5.
What's the 4.3?
I'm not sure on the 4.3.
I was looking at that. I
Could
circled
be an
it.
allocation,
Like,
yeah, that they have,
Seems kind of strange.
yeah. But overall, mostly stable from the prior month, not a lot of change that we see there. So if we do go to page 165, which is the general fund in total. The middle column's there for actual. That's where I want to highlight property taxes current. It's $4,986,986. At this point last year, it was only 2.6 million collected as of October 31st. So again, we did receive more payments in as of this October 31st deadline. The note A on the far right column, variance of 735,000. That's the amount that shows the difference in the assessed value rate that we are adding, or that's the difference between our projection and what we're projecting and coming in, but we're projecting more because the assessed value is higher than what we originally budgeted, from the 4.9% to the 5.6 or 5.59%. As far as expenditures in the actuals column in the middle section there at 7.6 million. At this point last year, it was also $7.6 million. And we are projecting by the end of the year to be in the far right column variance, 1.6 million over our projection of the ending fund balance. Next, page 167, highlighting on Fund 160, 170, TRT is combined. And again, I'll just highlight a few funds. If you have any questions on any fund as I skip through the pages, go ahead and just ask me as well. Overall, our revenue for transient room taxes is through October. Again, July through October are usually our highest months, our largest months of revenue. And again, revenue is delayed by 1 month. But we are down from last year by about 1.5%, and we're down from our budget by 1.4%. So it's about 1.5% on each. So we're not this year yet, we're not increasing our revenues from what we were. We are still under budget. We do show the end of year projections coming down of having $2 million of the ending fund balance. And again, that is reserved for the final Sun River payment, which is completing our $8 million commitment in the grants and contributions towards them. There are two numbers that I want to point out as far as what we budgeted and where we'll end up. So up in the transfer out section, the second from the bottom, transfer out courthouse debt. The board and the budget committee approved, the board adopted 1.9 million. That's when we were anticipating a full year of debt service payment and the debt issuance costs. Now we're projecting, because the first year will be an interest only payment. We'll start the debt service payment in fiscal year 25. So we'll have a savings for that. The two lines up, transfer out general county reserve. So the excess will go into that general county reserve, which will be reserved for future debt service payments from that money that we're holding. And this number will be 800,000 more. And again, that's because part of that transfer coming out, but this account also makes up for the deficit that we have for our projection of 200,000 less in revenues as well. So that's why it's not above by $1.1 million, but it's only ahead by $800,000. Finally, the middle columns down at the very bottom, beginning fund balance, you can see where we budgeted beginning fund balance at 4.7 million, but the actuals is 4.5. So that's a reduction of $200,000. So we'll account for that. Our year-end projection accounts for that as well. $200,000 coming into play that we don't have. So we know we have that $2 million commitment. So any additional revenue or decrease in revenue, that's where the general county reserve picks it up. It either reduces our transfer or it adds to it. So to make a balance where we need to be. So we just got to hope revenues take up. Right, there you go. Hey, ARPA page 168 in your packet, Fund 200. We will be making an adjustment actually on Wednesday. You have coming before the board a public hearing and consideration for resolutions opening up for our various funds. This is the first year we're going to actually make an adjustment for when you where you budget your beginning working capital and where they come in. Usually it's higher or lower. And so actually Budget Office, we made this decision a couple months ago, and we're just waiting for the final numbers from the audit, which these are now based on final numbers. So any fund that had budgeted a higher beginning fund balance than what they actually realized. So now we'll be coming back to the board for the resolution to true up those adjustments. And so there'll be 19 funds that have overestimated their beginning working capital. So what that means is they usually then will reduce their contingency or reduce expenditures to account for that less revenue. Because as you know, Oregon local budget law, you have your resources have to balance to your expenditures. So if you have less resources, then you need to reduce your expenditures. So
you just said 19 funds?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And we're just starting with the funds that or that overestimated their beginning fund balance. We think next year we're going to, because we're rolling this out slowly, we're going to have all funds, because what a fund can easily do is underestimate the beginning fund balance, but then they begin with more money. Well, more funds, that should be reflected in the budget as well. Usually that amount just goes into contingency at that point, but at least it's a true up of where you actually ended from where you budgeted. So we'll get to that, but that's where I want to point out in the ARPA fund, they show the year ending at $400,000 in the fiscal year 2023 column. That 401, that's actually essentially just interest income. Because you can see on the state and local resources for 23 at 14.6 million. And then their requirements expenditures also equal 14.6. So the revenues always equal their expenditures because of how that grant works. So in fiscal year 24, we'll make that adjustment where their revenues will equal their expenditures as well. Otherwise, it's on target. Sheriff's Office Fund 255, page 170 in your packet. The first two lines, LAD 1 and LAD 2, property or current tax, just want to highlight the last right column under variance, A and B. So because of the higher assessed value rate. These are the rates above what they had originally budgeted. They are expecting to get in $145,000 in the countywide district and the rural of about $80,000 on their revenues. Again, so they've collected 14% of their revenues year to date, and their expenditures have been 29% to date. One thing you will notice is they will be one of the funds that has the adjustment between their budget at down the middle columns, down near the bottom fund balance of 13.1 million and actuals at 11 million. Their total fund balance to date is 1.2 million. So this is better than last month, where last month it was a negative 1.2 million. And that's because they started to receive property tax revenue in this month of October as opposed to November, which is helpful. And this is combined 701, 702, just a reminder of that. But that's a product of last year during the budget process, the contingency levels weren't budgeted at the policy level of 4 months. So they started with less contingency, less reserve. So they didn't have as much carryover to carry over and to make it through those months until tax receipts come in. For example, a reserve policy 4 months of 33% would be about 17.6 million, and combined the budget was about 9.3 million for the contingency. Now, obviously, there is a plan and working with budget and finance to make the adjustment for working on this. And we actually have the sheriff's office here if there are any outstanding questions from any of their projections, any of their budgets for this year, or how they want to handle that. So if I'll just open it up if the board has any questions. And I can talk to additional amounts of money.
On a different note, Captain Schultz, it was really good to read front page of the Bend Bulletin yesterday, that article about what you're doing to help people that have drug issues. So thank you for being part of that story. Thank you. I mean, it seems like not every county has the capabilities that you are giving to people that really do need the help getting off drugs.
We appreciate it. It's a lot of hard work for our staff, but they really think that it's very important to our community to do something better for them and get people off the addiction.
I appreciate it.
We're taking a little detour from our finance report. I also want to thank Captain Schultz for taking on the production of that measure 110, or the drug treatment court white paper for the LIPSEC.
Yeah, we'll be working on that here in the next couple of weeks, trying to figure out how we can help the community get something back with Judge Ashby.
A proposal that meets Judge Ashby's approval.
He's very good at this stuff. Yeah.
So the trends that we're following in the budget office and working with the sheriff's office, and again, is under the actuals column, the total fund balance 1.2. Last year at this time, they had 5.3 million. The year prior in October 21, it was 7.5 million. So just that trend going down now with the approved rate. So obviously we want to watch that and make sure that continues to go back up and increase where it should be. So that's what we're working with them.
Okay, Robert, we'll talk about the 5-year forecast in the mid-year budget committee meeting in 2 weeks from tomorrow. Is that?
That is correct. Yep. And I think previously we mentioned our policy. We actually have a policy where the major funds or other funds that might be under distress, we should be doing a 5-year forecast on that. So we'll be including that as part of the budget presentations this year. Sheriff's office, obviously being a major fund, would automatically be included in that as well. Page 171, Health Services, Fund 274. I just want to point out on the bottom, the middle columns, budget and actuals. This is where budget beginning fund balance of 11.4 and actuals, they actually ended the last year and came in this year at 12.5. So this is an example of a fund. Now this is a whole roll-up fund where they are ending up with $1.1 million more in this fund 274 than what they had budgeted. And so the next year when we get to this point, that's what we'll be asking them to recognize this. It goes in their contingency, goes in their reserves, and then it's again a true up of where they're. Page 173, Behavioral Health Fund 274.
I was wondering, where did the
Yes.
divorce filing fees go?
I don't have that. Are you aware where divorce filing fees? Yeah, we'll have to check on that.
It doesn't have, we don't have anything in budget or actual, just was wondering.
Like come through mediation, that's part of the mediation funds.
It comes into the general fund and then it gets split out into a couple of different places, one of which I believe is behavioral health.
Well, I'm looking at behavioral health.
Oh, page 173, there is divorce filing fees, but yeah, their budget and actuals are zero now. We'll have to see.
Okay. I know, I was just like,
It's money that goes to the judicial, that goes to circuit court, and then they used to use those funds for parental mediation. They used to hire behavioral health staff, but they decided to go out to bid with a nonprofit. But and so some of that money goes to Mary's Place and some of it goes to circuit court.
Well, so then last year, it looks like it was a direct resource to health. Maybe it was a transfer in from general fund or something changed.
Yeah, I don't think we usually put it in the line item per se, as
Yeah.
much as a transfer in from those mediation dollars.
Well, the answer is nobody's quite sure yet.
but it was there, so
Well, I'm sure, obviously it's
Yeah,
somewhere, but we'll find it, yeah.
it is, a couple $100,000 maybe.
One thing to note on this fund is behavioral health fund. We report on Fund 274 in our reports. The one fund we don't report on is Fund 270, which is the behavioral health reserve. And they have a reserve of actually $16 million that's reserved for OHP. So in addition to whatever amount is listed here in this fund, they also have $16 million. So they are quite healthy and one of the healthiest funds that we have here. So year to date, their expenses are $11 million. Thus far, their total fund balance in the actuals column is 15.4 million. They are in timing of the year, anticipating by the end of the year, they'll only be at 1.2 million, which is less than they're projecting, but as of right now, that's not where they're at. Fund 295, page 175 for community development.
So you just said behavioral health had a $16 million reserve.
Yes.
And
Yes,
yet,
in their fund 270.
okay, and yet we only, at the navigation center, the city of Bend pays for one person there, but Deschutes County doesn't pay for anyone really to be there on a daily basis. Interesting. So maybe we could find some money then to have more help with people that are at the navigation center. I mean, that's not for you,
Right,
but
that would
I'm
be a
just like going,
question.
we have
comment with our
16
health
million in
services.
reserve? Yes,
Yes.
okay.
The financial projections for health services, behavioral health in particular, is super complicated, which is why they're always trying to do things very conservatively. And then when the federal funding finally comes, or the reimbursement, for OHP provided services finally comes, then they squirrel that away. So there's a reason why they try to maintain a larger reserve there than some other departments where it's much more straightforward to project what you're gonna spend and what you're going to take in.
And really the reason for the comment is really when you're looking at their funds holistically, that is part of the equation as well. Okay, page 175, community development, fund 295. So through October, CDD has spent $260,000 of its fund balance. It has not needed to dip into reserve to cover costs as of yet, but as they continue to go through the year, they'll see. The intent is to maintain a $1 million ending fund balance, but they may need the reserve transfer in November, depending how, the numbers, we're almost at the end of November, but depending how those go. Year-end projections for revenues have increased based on a set of apartment complexes permits that they expect to give out soon, so it might be related to the earlier conversations about multi-housing. But that's why they bumped up their projections a little bit, because of the permitting expected. And expenses were slightly reduced in their M&S categories. So net by the end of the year, they are projecting, and like they mentioned, trying to stay around that $1 million mark, which is still $1 million under their ending fund balance. But they, again, I think they've been doing a great job of managing their fund, given the challenges and the resources. That's what fun. Road fund 325. Obviously, you spoke with Road earlier. You want to point out in the actuals column in the middle, federal PILT payments of $2.3 million, $2.4 million that they received. So we did receive the PILT money in this road fund during fiscal year 23 and 24. The road agency received SRS payments in May of 23, but we haven't seen the bump yet. We are anticipating that this next PILT payment that we get will be reflective of that. So we're still waiting for that to come in.
And that'll be in the next bill payment, or they'll
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
reconcile?
It's annual. It'll be in the next, because they won't subtract that out on behalf of Deschutes County because it went to the road agency.
Yeah.
Ideally, that's what we're anticipating.
That was the whole idea.
That was
there.
the plan. That's right. Flipping ahead.
And that'll be in
yes.
May.
Yes, yeah. May, and then it looks like we accrue it back to the year that's for, so that's why we're showing this 2.4 million in fiscal year 24, the year we're in, even if we got the payment in May, if it was for the next year. I'm gonna go skip through a bunch of pages. A lot of these funds seem to be on target for where we were. I'll go to page 188 in your packet, Health Benefits Fund, 675. But again, if you have questions on any funds, let me know. Resources to date in the Health Benefits Fund is $9.4 million, the actuals column in the middle. And thus far, we've only spent 7.2 million. Again, the first full month of expenditures is always accrued back anyway, because the delay in the billing process. But right now, the total fund balance in the fund is 8.3 million. But they are anticipating by the end of the year, it will be at 4.2 million. So as we catch up our expenditures and go through, we're still monitoring the fund's expenses as it comes through each month. But we haven't seen the big, there's been some big payments that we pay, but we haven't seen a big increase like we had before. But we are monitoring that because, as you know, we did increase the budget for those higher costs as well.
So you really think it's gonna go down to 4.2 then, even though we're at 8.2 right now?
Yeah, we had budgeted 3.8.
Right.
So it will be a little higher than where we're budgeting, but based on the current trends, that is what we're expecting. Again, you can have 1 month that will be very favorable, or 1 month that could, or two throw it off. But based on the months received thus far, this is what our projection is.
And these are using our audited numbers from Los Adams then?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so that they're all applicable.
Yep, and we are anticipating, as I'm looking at the date here, we've gone through a couple revisions of our draft act for financial statements and our component units, and by November 30th, so just in a couple days, we are anticipating that we'll have our we'll have our audit released, and we'll get the letters from Moss Adams as well. Any other questions?
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lots of good news.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes, I'll have to take that home and memorize it, right? Great news. 17, whoa.
So at this time, other items? Anything else specifically not brought items? Right from the holidays, no snow yet. No one got to see it. So as I say, we work our way back to our safe parking program discussion, item number 5. This will be a follow-up from earlier discussion at this meeting. How about we just take a moment and stand up? It's been 3 hours for us up here. So we'll reconvene about for a break. Yeah.
I was almost gonna go, I'm like, wait a minute, that was.
Yes. The longest way possible, right? Do some steps. I know.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Oh, great, okay, yeah. So it's- right, good. Property. Oh, isn't it interesting? It's education. It's this big. Sure.
No, 215 would not allow it. Okay, where? Okay, so, yeah, oh, separate and apart from this. Yeah, I don't know. No.
Oh, yeah, I did.
No, I think he said it's not. Oh. Cause that's always been his position.
Oh, see, I mean.
I thought so. On non-resort. Yeah. Yeah.
committees back together here. Thank you, it's the break.
Yeah.
Right.
A
And,
few follow-up answers to questions that were asked.
oh, see, there we go, that's how we.
Real time.
Yes, Commissioner Adair, you asked about the City of Redmond program and whether or not trailers are allowed.
Yes.
The Redmond Municipal Code defines, it refers to a vehicle, and then it defines vehicle as a car, camper, traveler trailer, recreational vehicle, or similar conveyance. The other reasons would be
It's
travel.
included. Okay, good.
And then Commissioner Chang, you asked about the City of Bend program and whether or not the public entity, if the public entity is a leasing land, if that counts. Yes. Their code says a public entity may allow more than 6 vehicles and or tents on property owned or leased by the public entity. So,
So as I was saying, there's some of these decision points that we can discuss and figure out if there's direction to be put to this. As a starting point, I basically come to the conclusion that I agree with most of the conclusions that were put in there, I guess, is my starting. We can discuss specific things, and then any other high-level thoughts though? I mean, is this a go, or are we thinking we're gonna do something in safe parking? Yeah.
It is incredibly successful. And I believe the numbers out of Redmond, the process numbers are going to be actually pretty outstanding. The good news in Bend is that they don't have very many spots. And so we could do something within these parameters. It would be great to know if we can, provide supervision and management. I guess it says or management. I think that really helps people navigate the system, find their way and, transition back to a healthier lifestyle.
Well, we started off with public testimony and, progressive event south of town here. This could be one of those tools, but we're still in a spot where a year later, from my point of view, a year later, I don't know if we're gonna ever turn a corner on this, and we have to at some point. This is the organization of our society. We build a community, people buy private property, we have housing, and then we have other people that are, struggling. So I'm not making any judgments here. From Homeless Outreach Services team, we heard that we have serious and persistent mental illness and schizophrenia and substance abuse disorder. There's some people that need help out there. So when it comes to the big picture, I feel like which wall are we gonna push on here? And I refer to walls because I feel like we're in a box with the state land use system, just a lot of the pieces out here. Leadership from the governor's office, the legislature, we're getting it from all sides. So I'm just putting out my mindset here to start with.
Well, I would just say that safe parking is a proven approach to moving people out of homelessness. We have in front of us some opportunities to expand the area where safe parking can happen. That's completely within, still feeling it out, but there are some real opportunities completely within the state land use planning system and completely within, alignment with our various cities' programs. So I'm very excited to see us move forward with this.
I think Commissioner Dare, did you mention that safe parking program in Bend, there's only a few years?
Yeah, that's why I met with all the church people last Wednesday. There's 4 churches involved. Oh my gosh, one of them has 5 spots, one has 2 spots. I mean, it's really
So
teeny.
less than we'd expect.
Yeah, totally less than you'd expect because the Redmond program is really, we're participating in Redmond. I don't know if we have any land inside the city of Bend that we could use for safe parking like we did in Redmond. But so I have this huge list and I'm meeting tomorrow with another church director who has contact with a lot of people. The 4 people involved really emphasize that their neighbors get really upset. And yet the program down where Bill Kuhn is a member, I guess Bill left, but that church actually has 5 spots. They feel like it really, they're next in the Caldera High School, you know, it keeps their parking lot safe. They actually do that, the firewood cutting there, they do cords of wood. I mean, they do a lot of wonderful things that helps those that aren't as, fortunate at this time to really help give them a hand up. So anyway, but yeah, the program in Bend, I had asked Mayor Keebler months ago, I said, oh my gosh, we really need that program to be expanded. Because you see what happens when people get help, are surrounded, you know, with supervision, Stacy Whitty's people, you know, where she can be there. And it really needs, I'm hoping that with all my efforts that I will be able to get more people involved and go talking to neighborhoods. It actually makes their neighborhood safer and these for leaders, in their humble opinions, it really helps make their neighborhoods safer. And most of those all have churches involved. They have a Head Start church, Head Start school at the Nativity Lutheran Church, and most all of them do. Because I was thinking like, oh, they said, no, it really has worked out really well. So they've only had very few problems. Have they had over the past so many years?
As Janice was emphasizing when she was here, the community perception of the homeless is really important to people's acceptance of citing various kinds of shelter in their neighborhood. So the more that we can do, if you're gonna be going to speak to a bunch of neighborhood associations, the more we can do to humanize the problem and help people understand, you know, that I always think back, you know, safe parking, I always think back to the story of King Varner and Redmond. We're not talking about someone from, you know, from out of town who's strung out on drugs and doesn't want to work. We're talking about, you know, for safe parking, where in many cases, we're talking about people who are employed in our community, don't make enough money to afford rent, and can be very good neighbors if you give them a chance. So that's, I would say that is the main reason that kind of the fear of kind of faceless, homeless, you know, person, the image that has been put in people's head. That's the main reason why there's not more safe parking, not more churches who have bought into safe parking in the city of Bend. So the more that we can do to address that, the more I think we will see churches come to work.
So, as I say, yeah, there's a proposed package here, we can kind of discuss the attributes of these orders, the variables that were discussed, and thank you very much for your, you know, legal analysis and the history of land use and community development, the whole deal here.
All right, so first is a board order within the urban growth boundary. The proposed draft allows tents, yurts, huts in for the Bend area, but not for the Redmond, and this mirrors both cities' programs.
So yeah, I'd like to call it just safe parking vehicle, you know, Bend. I mean, there's a big variable there about what other structures could end up having, so I'd like to keep it more simple. So I see the intention of aligning with Bend. I mean, so then it gets back to, are we envisioning a specific property or not? I guess that's a conundrum I have. You know, if we have zoned property that, EFU zone property that want to use this, but they can't use this, what are we doing and why are we doing it? I guess it gets me right back to the beginning of the question here.
Right now, we're talking about within the UBGB, so we're not talking about EFU zone property.
Yeah.
We're talking about,
Right.
we're talking about whether we want to have a program that's consistent with the city of Bend's.
But do we have anybody that we're thinking of that is gonna utilize this program? Because we could be talking about something that nobody's even gonna wanna pick up here. I don't know that anybody's gonna use this. If I heard about Bend Park District and
if nobody wants to use it, then what's the problem with being permissive?
Well,
as long as we're not violating state law, you know, and Kim and I were talking along with Peter kind of during our little break. And it's not all of this is crystal clear, you know, I mean, I think that the Oregon legislature didn't do the best job laying this out. You know, we understand the overall purpose, but, you know, does that mean that they're, you know, that the county won't be subject to some sort of challenge? You know, I don't feel comfortable trying to guarantee you that.
So yeah, we're taking a legal
Right.
step here. With unknown risk or whatever. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
it's a.
Right.
I mean, I assume that the city of Bend didn't craft that policy in a vacuum.
Right. But the city is also the city, and cities and counties,
Very different.
very different.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
carve out, you know, there's transitional housing accommodations that are called out of statute, ORS 197, 746, that explicitly acknowledges that what transitional housing accommodations represent, and they can include yurts, huts, cabins, fabric structure, tents, similar accommodations, as well as areas in parking lots. So
Yeah.
it is, as the chair noted, that, and Nick and I have talked about this for years, cities are afforded, inside urban growth boundaries, are afforded so much latitude in ways that counties are not. And take, you know, Cam's huddling us up, like, you know, just reminding staff and the board that this isn't, our understanding of House Bill 2006 is not dispositive, that we can't say for absolute certainty
Yeah.
that a safe parking program consistent with what's now written in statute in ORS 195, that someone couldn't challenge that as the county making a land use interpretation, and they could appeal an administrative, call it an authorization or a permit, and say, you just interpreted your code, we're sending you straight to the Land Use Board of
Right.
Appeals. So it's, you know, the intent, when you look at House Bill 2006, there's so many other sections that are kind of carving out the way I would phrase it, they're carving out opportunities to provide housing shelters for those experiencing houselessness separate from the land use program. But as Stephanie noted, it's not well structured. So this is just, you know, a disclaimer that we put at the bottom, you know, that this is the Oregon land use system, and this could be easily a matter of first impression.
Correct.
So what, where in HB 2006 do they parse what can happen inside a UGB and what can happen outside a UGB? And how would that apply differently to the city of Bend than to Deschutes County within the UGB?
That's a great question. Okay, so section 5 is limited to within an urban growth boundary. So that parses, you know, it's a little bit more expansive than section 6. Section 6 does not say, oh, you can only, you know, this only applies to outside the UGB. It's just almost like, I would say, almost a catch-all section. But it's not as expansive as section 5. So both of our proposed orders are pursuant to authority under section 6 of the House bill. We don't reference section 5.
But if this specific question we're looking at right now
Mhm.
is within the UGB, then
Yeah.
we should reasonably be able to operate under section 5.
Mhm.
And under section 5, tents, yurts, et cetera, are allowed within.
And it states that also in statute.
Right.
197,
Right.
746, which
Mhm.
I think dovetails to
Right.
what section 5 represents.
I don't know, I drive by tents on the way into town every day, and now there's more tents right by the stabilization center on that little knoll. And I just think, oh my gosh, what was it, like 10 degrees or something this morning?
Well, these are,
More people die in cold weather than they do in summer weather. It's 7 times more dangerous. And here we're allowing people to be in a tent and they could be freezing to death. And is that really what we want to do? Honestly, I mean,
There's a whole continuum here, though. I mean, you know, like an ice fishing tent is pretty well insulated. You can have a heater going in there. It's got plenty of,
These don't look like ice fishing tents.
well, that's not necessarily what people would use in a safe parking setting. Right? A safe parking setting is not,
So you're saying you want to allow tents and yurts in other structures?
I don't think we wanna preclude that. I mean, those.
So you support
the-
aligning with Ben and Redmond's choices? Or
Yes.
going past?
Yeah, no, I think,
Redmond
we should-
is.
I think, in order not to confuse people. You know, in the Bend area, we should do what Bend is doing, and in the Redmond area, we should do what Redmond.
What do you think?
I don't know, I just worry about our temperature because it is, as I just said, 7 times more dangerous
None of
with
it's
cold
good.
weather.
Yeah, none of it's
Yeah,
good.
none of
These
it's
are not
good.
optimal situations at all.
And to let somebody be in a tent and they freeze to death, then it just seems awful.
I mean, if you're in an established authorized safe parking site, then it allows you to actually. Do something more than just a cheap little, 3-foot tall tent. Because you have some predictability and stability and security there. Which is one of the main reasons why people don't invest more or like try to do more in terms of tenting in unauthorized locations.
So I'm gonna be more and more frustrated going down the fact of what could be done somewhere. And we don't even have anywhere that somebody's gonna do anything. It's like, I don't see why we're even doing this. It's a great idea, and I support allowing churches in the rural to be able to do this. So is that in here? I guess.
But they
that's
just said we
outside.
can't do it at churches because they're on EFU land.
Well, on the
Outside the
churches next to
UGB.
the Gales property, yes. I mean, I can't broadly say that for every
But I mean,
single
my
church.
vision was always
Inside
that,
the
you know,
UGB,
Right.
paved parking lot next to a church, having a couple spots if the congregation's ready for it, seems like a great opportunity. Yeah. But after that, I mean, it's all speculation and ideas,
we're not reviewing a land use application.
or we could be.
I think
We could be, but we're not. I mean, the comprehensive plan, when we pass the comprehensive plan, it's not gonna be
Well, and so-
about a specific.
So let's get back to one other
Yeah,
thing.
we're
So
saying
is your
land
vision
use.
for the Gales property, when you wanna say yes on this, is because of that property, is that the vision? Is that the scenario you're envisioning? Cause I'm envisioning some.
I'm picturing beyond that. Cause I mean, what's on our screen right now is within the UGB. The Gales property is not within the UGB. There are other opportunities. I'm sure there's a bunch of churches that are within the UGB outside city limits. Those are opportunities.
Yeah. So, as I say, so urban growth boundary and urbanized land, or maybe you can help me with the terminology here. So maybe this isn't a discussion, as I say, there's just a little bit of land at the edge of an existing developed city.
Yeah, so you have an urban growth boundary, you have city limits, which is the incorporated area, and then what we call it, the urban unincorporated area, the land that's not yet annexed. Is technically under our jurisdiction. Now, for land use issues, through our joint management agreements with the cities of Redmond and Bend. The county, the board has chosen for years to delegate land use and building authority to the cities. With the understanding that this is their future, this is the land that they're gonna be planning for and urbanizing over presumably a 20-year period. This land this opportunity that's of lands within the UGB that are not in city limits is not being structured with Eric's leadership as a land use process or as requiring a land use decision.
It does fit under that same scenario of the joint management.
I think it's separate because
Is it coterminous with the joint management? Is it the same land?
It's the same land that the joint management agreement is addressing, but the
Right.
joint management agreement is folding it under
No.
matters that are typically under the purview of CDD. This is
So,
under something else.
With that information, I would accept all the recommendations and there's no debate here. I mean, that's just the.
You mean you agree on the proposal to allow tents and yurts
Yeah.
for the Bend UGB?
Yeah.
but not for Redmond. For all of Redmond.
Just
Follow
aligning
Redmond's
to
be
program, follow that
consistent.
program.
Yeah.
So there's at least 2 votes for what's been drafted from staff.
You support that, Commissioner?
No, because if,
No,
if we're 29 degrees below zero, I really worry about people in tents, so, you know. Anyway,
They'll be in a lot better shape if they're in a tent in safe parking and they can run over to the church basement.
Well,
Than if they're out at Chinatown Road.
Yeah, let's go with that for now.
Okay. Next question is, under Ben's program, if it's safe parking for 3 or less, they allow that without city approval. What's been drafted for the county is that we would require county approval regardless of the number. And the reason for that is so that we can verify that sanitation requirements are being met.
totally support that.
As long as the administrative burden for us is not massive.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just ask the minimum requirements. Okay, now we're moving to outside the urban growth boundary, but still a mile from it.
And so, and when we say a mile, that's a definition that just kind of came up here, correct?
Yes, that was.
Nobody else told us that, yeah.
Commission.
That's just, go ahead.
I was gonna say, just going back to the prior. Should we, is there a motion in a second to create, or are we gonna bring it back and put it on the specific agenda?
We'll bring back the board order based on what we get today.
Okay, I don't know if we can just
When will we do that?
move it forward immediately.
Well, the
Okay.
board can adopt it today, or we can put it on for next week.
Okay. Just didn't want to wait for another 2 months.
Gonna
Yeah.
wrap that up, what,
Next week is
great,
great.
next step, please.
Okay, so this next one, the staff or the draft board order for outside the UGB does not allow tents and yurts because we don't believe that's allowed.
There's not a carve out in statute like there is for transitional housing inside urban growth boundaries. To put some additional sideboards on that.
So we're operating in section 6.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, I think there's consensus on that.
I support that.
Right, no.
And then the next one is again for that 3 or less vehicles. We recommend that we.
County
still have
approval.
County approval. We support that. Number 3, should safe parking be allowed on resource lands? Staff's opinion is state land use does not allow that, but we wanted to highlight that for discussion because there's been lots of public discussion about that.
Yeah, so we're in this. I'd say no, we, following the laws of the state of Oregon, elected official.
Did Park and Rec specifically offer this location as a?
No, it's been brought up. I don't know, Commissioner, did you go to a meeting that discussed that site? It's the old fire station.
But it's by school.
So I'm not sure if Parks and Rec has offered it up or there's just been discussions
No,
about
they
it.
didn't, I don't think they ever did that.
The Gales property, we're going to solve for this by doing the rezone. So. If there's legal ambiguity here, I don't think that we need to risk that.
Go, all right.
I think it's really tragic because that is such a fabulous piece of property. And those owners want to be involved and I only wish they would have maybe started seriously, 8 months ago, but oh well. And we'll figure out a way to get it done.
We could have helped with the rezone process. Since they're basically doing a solid for the public, but.
No, they don't want to sell the property. They want to maintain the property. They have a vision.
I said they're doing a solid for the public. They're not that they're selling.
I can say what I needed to say. They don't want to sell it. They have a vision and they want to be, they want to make a difference. So it's a positive difference. It's just going to take them longer.
Yeah.
All right.
We were just having a little sidebar here. And thank you for bringing that up. If there was an application to rezone the Gales property, some of these discussions, you know, I
Stop
mean,
talking
like,
about it.
yeah,
So we'd all have to recuse ourselves and try to
Well,
vote by himself?
yeah, I guess that wouldn't be possible, that would be a quorum. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Or would it go to a hearings officer?
but a hearings officer can't make the final decision on a rezone application, they can only make a recommendation.
Based on this zoning. The underlying zoning requires a board hearing, so.
What about an executive order from the governor? I'll figure over 20 pounds of your mints.
I think there's something that could happen as it did with finding temporary sheltering for people that were displaced by wildfires that LCDC adopted a couple of years ago. It's just a matter of the governor would have to put that in motion and then the commission would need to take action. So maybe there, but outside of a
Yeah,
legislature,
right.
there may be an avenue there, but
I think that, I mean, okay, I'm not part of this policy, this discussion, but I think if I recall that we reached out to the governor earlier in the year and, yeah, somebody needs to make more pressure on her. Put some more pressure on.
Oh, there's.
What other decision?
All right, so now these are general discussion items. The question about application fee, the recommendation is not to charge an application fee.
Correct.
that's fine.
All right. Next is, should the county program allow the host to charge people to camp? The proposal would not allow that. Mr. Chang mentioned about allowing, but one option is to allow after 6 months. That was discussed today.
I mean, you look at programs like Rogue Retreat in Medford, you look at, you know, that the village, the St. Vincent's Village, right in Bend. And they, you know, the idea is to give people some safety and stability in the beginning, and then after they've been there for a while to, you know, offer them gentle encouragement to, you know, if they're in a good place to, you know, move on to something more permanent. So I think the idea of letting a host for safe parking charge people after 6 months, I think is creating the right kinds of incentives and support and structure. I mean, what they do in what they do at the tiny house village in the Rogue Retreat tiny house village in Medford is they charge people, they don't charge them the first couple months, and then they add $100 a month, you know, for the later months. And they put most of the money in an account to give back to the person, you know, to apply towards a deposit, you know, on an apartment, later on. So it seems like a really good way of getting people in the habit of you know, when they reach a stable place to make an expenditure on a monthly basis for the lodging that they're gonna need. That would be my argument for allowing it after 6 months.
I would agree with that. Yeah. People need to get back into the habit, responsibility, and 6 months, hopefully. And, you know, it's like a forced savings account. I think it's really helpful to people because I heard some of the problems with the Portland programs where they let people have free rent for 2 years. Those people were no closer to being prepared how to fend for themselves after that 2-year period. And then they were giving them another 6-month extension. You know, this was a family program. I think they had like 20 families in it, but nobody was ready to like actually make it in the real world. And I think, you know, it's important.
All right, sounds like there's.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna go there, but okay.
I'll jump in from a legal perspective, which is
Some tenant-
really, it starts to look like a campground if you're charging. Just so you know, and it starts to look more like a land use that's not subject to this carve out any longer. Just to put that out there is.
Even if it's going into a fund, their fund, they get when they're done to move on and actually have a deposit for
Yeah,
an apartment.
you know, I mean, I think that that's a good argument, you know, I mean, again, I think.
I know
we
that
would like-
Oasis Village that was part of their story and
Yeah.
Road Retreat does
Yeah.
that. So how do they get around it?
I don't know.
They're a
We-
city.
Yeah,
They're a
yeah,
city.
there you go, we're right back to that,
Okay.
yeah.
So how about, I mean, one of the thoughts is
Okay.
to revisit this.
Yeah, I mean, if it's gonna, if it creates murky land use issues, then.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah,
There's probably some way they can figure out to. You know, if they wanna do that kind of a deposit program, you know, this is for savings for your own down payment or your own first and last month's rent, then that's fine. Then they can call it something besides a fee. I
So
don't
let's
know.
not go there right now.
Sure.
yeah, yeah.
Just leave it out.
Leave it out.
And then the last question, which is really kind of separate from the two board orders, is allowing public entities or religious institutions to offer camping without restriction to inside or outside the UGB.
So this, if I understand correctly, this isn't just within 1 mile, this is countywide.
Right.
For churches.
I'll say that was the one item that I started with, it seemed like there may be a few rural churches, but there's, some of them are on EFU though.
So if the board wanted to move forward with this, what would that look like, Stephanie? Be a board order or a?
Well, you know, I mean, going back several months when you and I started working on this, Eric, we limited the outside UGB to within 1 mile of the UGB, I think based on board direction. There's nothing that restrictive in section 6 of House Bill 2006. But, you know, other than, you know, the zones that we're not gonna be, you know, not resources. So,
I mean, this is state law that says you
Yeah.
shall allow it on an institution, I mean.
may allow.
Well, no, but I mean, if we get to do it, does it, you know, does that supersede the EFU zoning or?
I
don't know if we could, yeah, who
Yeah.
who could arbitrate that for us?
County legal counsel.
Yeah,
I guess I'd like to make clear that I don't think our
Yeah.
position changes
No,
regardless
it's-
of whether or not it's a religious institution.
No.
I think that is the old language
Yeah,
that was actually removed under HB 2006 in a prior ordinance. So just because it's a religious institution, it doesn't change the legal analysis on whether or not safe parking would be permitted in an EFU zone property.
Yeah.
right.
So to clarify, it would be public or religious institution on non-resource zone land
Yeah.
anywhere in the county.
They could do it.
So
They
then-
could.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So is it possible to add that? I mean, I don't know, I have a list of all the.
Or take out just take out within 1 mile,
Exactly, so.
just outside the UGB, just
Or
take that.
create a third order.
Yeah, or create a third.
What's the best way?
I would. I was the last one that
Let's do
spoke,
that.
I would create a third order.
Let's do that.
Because
Yeah.
Eric has structured the second order
Mhm.
within 1 mile, lists the applicable zones.
Yeah.
You-
And I'll
If you do it
yeah.
countywide,
Yeah.
I think you're gonna wanna probably list, it just gets.
Keep it simple.
Well, so with this, you know, package that we just came up with, I would like to, yeah, I mean, kind of get it finalized and bring it back to another meeting. So we could get some feedback, you know, I mean, having it on our agenda list is gonna give us the world to be able to look at it, is my point.
What we could do is schedule it for, allow for public comment on, if that's the board's direction. That way,
December 6th.
Well, I wasn't even thinking of, I mean, not a public hearing.
It wouldn't
Well,
be
I
a
mean,
public hearing.
Yeah, I
because-
wasn't thinking public hearing, I was thinking publishing it on our agenda. Then anybody that's engaged can be able to email us right away and say, I really like it, or this is terrible, and I'm gonna bring it to the highest court in the land, or whatever.
Yeah.
So just get it published, yeah.
A hearing isn't required.
Well, okay, so we've had some discussion around whether it's an ordinance or an order. It's an order, not an ordinance. So I mean, inviting the public to comment on it, you know, I think that that's within your ability.
I guess the question for the
Yeah.
board is how would you like us to schedule?
Right.
We'll put it on a Wednesday meeting, and there's two ways of doing it. One is we don't put public comment time, and then it's up to the chair discretion if somebody wants to. Or we put public comment. It's not a public hearing, but the
Right.
board could publish it as inviting the public to comment.
Yes.
I like the idea next Wednesday.
Public hearing.
Not a public hearing, but if people need to comment, I'm sure we'll be hearing from people.
Well, so then it's a public hearing.
Well,
Sort of.
Yeah,
it's sort of is, but it's not.
It walks like one.
But it's a duck.
Is there any issue with us having a public hearing on the matter? So this is, proposed orders and then public hearing on the matters, so people can say their piece.
Yeah.
If there's anybody.
So this third order is gonna basically read any public or private entity can allow overnight camping on their land. If it's
Within
outside
certain
EFU,
resources.
if it's outside your resource.
Third order?
Yeah.
I thought
Public
what Eric
order.
was proposing was for a public entity or religious institution or something, so.
Right.
Maybe it's not public.
We were just talking about
Oh.
how that had been broadened for 2006.
It was, that language was changed, but I think he was.
We would
proposing
just keep it too.
Correct.
I mean, if the latter is that it would apply anywhere, you have an order that applies inside of UGB under county jurisdiction, outside UGB within 1 mile, and this third order is what I thought I heard, what there seemed to be consensus on, is to explicitly acknowledge that certain entities, as long as they're not on resource zone land, subject to a county approval.
Yeah.
Can establish a safe parking program.
Yeah, with the sanitary facilities.
With all the
Yeah,
rec-
yeah.
And the board could find, I mean, I guess for either of these orders, Eric, I'm sorry if you said this and I just now escaped me. Is there a cap or we leave it up to the applicant, correct?
On this third board order, what I'd recommend is we leave it up to the applicant, but it's based on the acreage.
Right, and the size of the facility, et cetera. Okay.
I mean, and if we recall, that there's county owns 11 acres way out east. And there was a proposal at some point to do outdoor shelter out there and we heard a lot of opposition to that. I think this third order, even if it's just public entities and and religious institutions, if it's countywide, that is going to set off alarm bells for a lot of people. And I think it's reasonable to have that discussion with the community. But I would hate to have that third order cause a lot of collateral damage to the first two orders.
Well, that's why they're separate too.
And result, yeah, but if we're processing them all at the same time, that third order might bring out a lot of concern and anger, and that's not always very surgical in the way that it shows up. So I guess I would like to see us do the first two orders next week and then kind of work towards a third order.
Another option could be the board could just, maybe for this third particular opportunity, maybe you want to wait to hear from some member of the public, like the Gales, but with the right zoning that are a champion, in which case you could have an order on the back burner. And then if you find that there is this interest countywide or regional wide, county staff, all of us could mobilize and put the board in a position to consider that third order when you knew you had a suitor, as opposed to, I know that you want to be proactive, but given the 3,000 square miles of Deschutes County, and the optics of what that could generate. So that's just a thought.
I mean, just us as a public landowner, we own property all over the place. Is it possible, so this is order, not an ordinance, is it possible to do an order on a property by property basis?
spot zoning, but this isn't rezoning, you know, I mean, but I'm thinking about like the arguments that a creative lawyer could come up with, or maybe not even that creative of a lawyer.
I'd say, yeah, let's stay away from
Any
it.
lawyer could come up.
Yes.
Stay away from it.
Let's be-
Or we could just draft it up and have it ready for when someone shows up who's interested.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
If I find someone on my
Well,
list.
it's a day, I'm thinking of that parking lot that has 50 spots in it for the church on Sunday, and you put 3 and 4 RVs in the corner. So that's where I'm starting from, that's all I was proposing, so.
Yeah.
Well, that exists in South County, for example.
There's a
Yeah.
few of them.
And that would be another approach to limiting the potential backlash if you, I mean, I was asking Eric, would you contemplate a cap? And maybe you contemplate a cap in order under this third option to limit, to be a little bit more sensitive about compatibility. And then to the extent if somebody reached out and said, you know what, I've got this property that is so unique that it could accommodate additional occupants, then you could revisit that order, or you could consider a fourth order. So there's a lot to consider, but
This reminds
that
me, we're
third
in the
topic
same
is
spot as,
full of.
campgrounds, there's some existing campgrounds here, and there was one of the efforts was calling them all up and saying, are you available for something? And nobody got involved.
The last option, which would be just religious institutions anywhere. because
Right.
They have to be non-residential, they have to have buildings, they have to
There you
have
go.
bathrooms, they have to have electricity.
Yeah, can you just say religious?
It could just be.
Yeah, I was thinking that would probably is the best way to go.
narrow. Happening.
Because it would give it would be all the benefits that I heard about for having the program. So anyway,
So we,
But yeah, these two are.
so we bring back these two board orders next Wednesday, and then the third one we'll just draft as staff
Mention it,
and
yeah.
just have it at the staff level, so
yes.
we hear from the board.
We'll have the discussion about it, I mean, do it for your existing religious institutions only.
So does the board want us to bring back a different meeting, but a third board order for just religious?
Let's wait on that one.
Draft it
I
out.
mean, see what happens.
Okay, so we will draft it up, but not bring it to the board yet.
Yeah, please draft something up just for religious.
So at 4:45, it's probably dark outside, but I forget about that, but it's not very fast. Is there anything else? Thank you very much, Eric. Anything else for the meeting? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Hey.
Am I going running today? Sure, I'm sorry.
So I'm working on criteria.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
We don't have. We're, so we don't do.